Chapter 1612. The Jiuzi evil god's eyes flickered, and his lips quivered as he communicated telepathically. His 9 pairs of round, dark eyes glanced back and forth at Li Qingshan, as if he was judging his capabilities. They could tell with a single glance that Qian Rongji was only a demon emperor. Let alone killing Jiuying, she could not even deal with that pig head. Li Qingshan's expression did not change. Suddenly, the Jiuzi evil god said in a childish voice, "Humph, why would mother be afraid of a cripple with only 1 arm like you? Brothers and sisters, let's go. Let mother teach them a lesson personally." As they said that, they retreated at the same time, but they asked in unison, "Oh right, you know where she is, right? If you don't, hee." His fair and rosy little face was filled with innocence and cruelty. That was probably the innate talent of all demon folk. "Don't worry, brothers and sisters. Of course we know." Qian Rongji turned around and glanced at Li Qingshan with a smile. "Right." Li Qingshan nodded silently. "That's good." The Jiuzi evil god left in satisfaction. In the end he said, "If you dare to lie to us, we will never spare you. Mother will not spare you either." "All right, they're gone." Qian Rongji turned into a little snake again and wrapped around Li Qingshan's wrist. "I acted on my own. Please don't be angry, sir." Li Qingshan remained silent for a very long time. He did not hold much hope for a peaceful negotiation in the first place, and he was also prepared for a great battle. Just now, the Jiuzi evil god's strength was even above his expectations. If he added Jiuying's support, it would be another bitter battle with a slim chance of survival. He could not criticize Qian Rongji's sowing discord. It was equivalent to eliminating 20 evil god-level enemies out of thin air. Now, as long as he got rid of Jiuying with the Xianyuan sword in his hand, he could enter the state of unity of heaven and man at any time. Even if the Jiuzi evil god suddenly changed sides, he would not be much of a threat. But all of this still caused him to feel deeply displeased. The devilish domain was simply filled with all sorts of evil deeds in the world at all times, and he felt that if he stayed in the devilish domain for too long, even his state of mind would be greatly affected, causing him to become more and more vexed and difficult to endure. "Let's kill our way out of this blood maze as soon as possible and settle our bet with Qiong Qi at Mount Qingqi before leaving the demon domain." With that in mind, Li Qingshan began to calculate again. It was a rather difficult task to find the exit to the Qiongqi demon realm among the 12 exits. However, there was only one location for the Jiuying. As long as it was calculated, there was no possibility of it being wrong. After a series of calculations, he realized that although the blood maze had undergone great changes as a whole, the place where Jiuying resided should not have changed. It was still in the core region of the blood maze and controlled everything like a queen bee. As a result, everything became even simpler. He did not even have to go around in circles to find a path. All he had to do was kill his way over. Li Qingshan hovered in the air. He closed his eyes and turned around slowly, adjusting his direction carefully. Suddenly, he stopped and opened his eyes. He raised his single arm and threw a punch. Bang, 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 bang. The aura of the punch tore through the walls of flesh and blood. A path that led to the heavens pierced through countless blood palaces, crushing all the demon folk in the way and heading straight for the very depths of the blood maze. At that moment, the blood maze was like a colossal monster that had suddenly awakened. The flesh and blood in the surroundings squirmed violently, pressing towards him. The blood palaces rapidly shrank and became extremely cramped. Invisible laws restrained and pressed down on him. Suddenly, he felt like he was shouldering a tremendous burden. Pustules protruded from the walls and burst open one by one, revealing white eyes that had no pupils and were bloodshot. They stared at him in unison with an indescribable look in their eyes. Li Qingshan's hair stood on end. The invisible gaze seeped into all of his pores, triggering the most primitive terror. It was the terror of a weak creature facing a powerful unknown creature. However, he did not resist this terror. He raised his remaining arm and looked at his trembling right hand. Yes, this is the terror. Countless flesh sprouted from the walls of flesh and blood again. They were so densely packed that it made him itch all over. In the blink of an eye, they grew into countless tentacles. The tips all split open, splitting into 8 segments and turning into mouthparts covered in sharp teeth. They let out abnormally sharp screams like the cries of infants as they wrapped around him and bit at him. All of this was enough to make a demon emperor have a mental breakdown immediately. Even evil gods would fall into a frenzy or even suffer from chi deviation. Li Qingshan was deeply affected, but he still did not suppress it with the spirit turtle. He allowed the frenzied thoughts to rampage through his sea of consciousness. Yes, it's this madness. After coming to the demon domain, the various gloom, hesitation, and loathing he had accumulated gradually overflowed, turning into a hysterical rage. The tiger demon's fury. He suddenly unfurled his wings of wind and roared at the sky. His murderousness was like the wind. In that moment, the tiger demon's malevolence reached an unprecedented level. It merged into the fierce wind created by the unfurling wings of wind, shredding all the tentacles and piercing all the eyes. The blood palace he resided in swelled up to several times its original size. It was still constantly accumulating a storm, mixed with lightning and thunder. "Jiao Ying, I'm coming." Li Qingshan stood in the middle of the wind and lightning. The storm had accumulated to the limit. He flapped his wings gently. With a boom, the blood palace shattered. Wind and lightning rumbled together as he rushed into the depths of the blood maze. He charged straight in, bursting through the numerous barriers. He ripped apart all the demon folk he came across mercilessly. At that moment, there was no pity or hesitation in his heart. There was only bloodthirst and brutality. Wherever he passed by, blood mixed with corpses, bones, and flesh, forming a river of blood. It followed the direction he had traveled in, gathering and whistling towards him. Boom! The storm smashed through an extraordinarily tough and heavy wall, suddenly entering a huge blood palace that was over 100 times larger than regular blood palaces. But as the river of blood flowed, it turned into a great waterfall, rapidly drowning the ground. Li Qingshan gazed over. A mountainous mushroom of flesh and blood stood in the center of the blood palace. It was similar to the mushrooms that demon folk ate. Its top was shaped like a placenta. A half-human, half-snake woman sat on it. Her loose hair covered her face as she hugged her slightly bulging belly, gently humming an ancient song. The woman seemed to be enveloped in the radiance of motherhood. Her singing was gentle and ethereal, filled with tenderness and a certain wondrous power. It immediately silenced the whistling of the storm. Even the ruthlessness in Li Qingshan's heart settled down. For a moment, he even began to doubt whether he had come to the wrong place or not. "Jiao Ying? Why have you invaded my palace? Why have you killed my child?" The singing came to a halt. The woman slowly turned around. Her beautiful face was filled with resentment. Li Qingshan raised his remaining arm and threw a punch. "There is no need for reason to kill." Chapter 16:13. The fist aura broke through the void, carrying with it a white aura, and rushed towards Jiao Ying like a mountain. Li Qingshan came with anger, and even the evil gods did not dare to take this punch head-on. Jiao Ying's face flashed with disdain, and she waved her hand lightly. The fist aura was blocked by an invisible barrier and exploded, only causing a ripple on the barrier. Jiao Ying was slightly surprised. Li Qingshan's strength was beyond her expectations, far surpassing the average evil god. But that's all there is to it. The sky was filled with wind and thunder, and the violent aura swept up torrential waves of blood, crashing and crashing in the blood palace, violently slamming against it. Thousands of waves were swept up, but they could not get close to the giant mushroom. Without hesitation, Li Qingshan flapped his wings and swooped down, waving his fist again. This time, it was not just the fist aura, but also the strength of the ox demon. His whole body pressed down like a mountain, and he did not believe that he could not break Jiao Ying's defense. Jiao Ying pointed with her index finger again. "Freeze!" Li Qingshan suddenly stopped, and he was frozen in midair. The howling wind and thunder calmed down, and even the wings of the wind god disintegrated. He gritted his teeth and roared, using the strength of the ox demon. His muscles bulged and his veins popped, but he still could not break free from this invisible restraint. Jiao said, "You dare to speak arrogantly in front of me with this little ability." This blood maze was her cave, her world, and she was the only god here. She was in the state of being one with heaven at all times, and her words were law. A simple body-freezing spell had infinite power, and no evil god was her match. Without such a method, she could not control the Jiao evil god, and everything was under her control. This was not the difference in power, but the difference in authority. As an ancient existence that was infinitely close to a true god, her understanding and control of the laws was far from what Li Qingshan, who had entered the state of being one with heaven by chance, could compare. Jiao Ying hooked her finger and pulled Li Qingshan closer. She laughed sinisterly. "You don't need a reason? But I had plenty of reasons. I will crush you inch by inch to avenge my children." "Ha, those kids of yours are just walking corpses. What's the difference between being alive and being dead? As for those 9 bastards who wanted to kill their mother, they deserve to die." Li Qingshan glanced at her abdomen scornfully. "And the vile spawn of demon folk in your belly. Why must you let him suffer and commit evil in this world? Why don't you let me end him for you?" After being hit by the great mockery technique, the Jiao Ying immediately flew into a rage. Li Qingshan's eyes flashed. The divine dragon heavenly works creation. He raised his head to the sky and roared. The dragon roared as he unsheathed his sword. Li Qingshan suddenly broke free from his shackles and became one with his sword. He transformed into an extremely strong and magnificent sword gleam, piercing through the invisible barrier and illuminating Jiao Ying's pale face. The Xianyuan sword had always been able to increase his authority. Not only had the divine dragon transformation unified all of the powers and laws of the miniature world, but it had also greatly strengthened his control over the Xianyuan sword. The might of that strike was even greater than when he killed evil god White Dolphin. It was no longer just one with his sword, but a divine dragon wielding the sword. Not only could he contend against Jiao Ying's authority, but he could even kill him in a single strike with the power of the Xianyuan sword. The light from the sword illuminated the entire blood palace, vaguely containing a dragon's roar. It became the only thing in the blood maze that was not under Jiao Ying's control. At that critical moment, Jiao Ying suddenly raised her head and bent over. Her hair drifted down. The sword whistled past her cheek, and her hair fell. A strand of blood flowed down from her forehead, but the wound did not heal. Her expression changed drastically. She could not help but cry out, "The Xianyuan sword!" Li Qingshan returned to his original form. With a sword in hand, he said proudly, "You actually recognize this sword." While evaluating Jiao Ying's strength, he was thinking of a countermeasure. Even though the power of the Xianyuan sword had been greatly enhanced, it was different from the battle with evil god White Dolphin. This blood maze was Jiao Ying's territory. He could not maintain the state of oneness of heaven and man for long. Every second consumed a great deal of energy. With his own miniature world, he could at most launch 8 strikes. Now there were only 7 left. 7 chances of survival. If he couldn't chop off Jiao Ying's head with 7 consecutive strikes, then he would be dead. So it's a little bastard from the Yu Xiong family. I have one more reason. Don't even think about leaving this place alive today. Jiao Ying soon regained his composure. The hatred on his face grew even more intense. Li Qingshan remained calm, looking for an opportunity to launch his sword. He pondered in his heart. This Jiao Ying's origins are really ancient. It seems that the reason these primordial demon gods were exiled here is related to the Yu Xiong family. If he did not have this Xianyuan sword, he would already be a distinguished guest of the Taotai demon god. But in many situations, it was all thanks to this Xianyuan sword. Therefore, he had no regrets in his heart. Even if there was a conspiracy, it was still a powerful weapon. Relying on oneself was always better than relying on others. Jiao Ying muttered something in a low voice. His pale face flushed unnaturally. In an instant, all the exits of the blood palace were tightly locked, including the huge hole that Li Qingshan had opened up. Amidst the surging sound of water, dark red blood swiftly spread out. However, It was not ordinary demon blood. Instead, it was similar to the river of blood that Li Qingshan encountered when he first entered the door of Xianpin. It had the ability to cleanse one's magic power and contaminate one's spirituality. Li Qingshan frowned. Relying on his fiend god body, he was forced to sever his arm to protect himself when he was stained with this tainted blood. Until now, he still hadn't recovered. Once this blood flooded the blood palace, he would no longer have a place to stand. Of course, this blood palace could not trap him. He could naturally swing his sword and kill his way out. However, if he could not walk out of this blood maze, he would have to face endless pursuit until he exhausted his last bit of energy. Even the Jiuzi evil god, who had rebelled against Qian Rongji, would probably betray her once again if he realized that he could not kill this mother. If it was as expected, the Jiuzi evil god was currently paying attention to the situation here. In the blink of an eye, the tainted blood had already flooded up and enveloped Jiuying. Be it his physical body or divine arts, he could no longer get close to her. Meeting on a narrow path, the brave wins. Li Qingshan let out a long laugh and flicked the tip of his sword with his finger, causing it to ring loudly. There are no gods 3 feet above my head. My life's sorrow, joy, honor, and disgrace have long been entrusted to the sharpness of my sword. Those who use the sword die by the sword. Life is life, death is death. What regrets do I have? There was no bright moon here, and he could not use the sword of the moon that he had used to massacre the demonic capital. Even if there was a bright moon, it would probably be difficult for him to use it. However, he still had himself. No matter how difficult a situation a person was in, he would always have himself as his companion. In his heart, there was a world, and even more so, the various transformations of gods and demons. Each transformation was a great Tao that could be transformed into sword techniques. First sword, bull demon strength sinks in the mud. Li Qingshan disappeared in an instant, and even the tip of his sword disappeared without a trace. In the world, there was only a stubborn will that would never yield, as well as the homeland and mountains that had long been far away, condensing into a heavy, and majestic sword intent. The surging tainted blood was suddenly pressed down several feet, appearing even more viscous and filthy, as though it was about to solidify. Jiuying could not help but lower his head. His body had become 10,000 times heavier. Every inch of his flesh and every bone was sinking down. His organs were about to shift positions, and he felt dizzy and nauseous. Even his consciousness was being pulled down deep, all the way to the 9 underworlds. He should have controlled the laws and fought with all his might, but deep in his heart, an inextricable sense of sorrow welled up. How many tens of thousands of years have I been exiled here? Wouldn't I still be trapped in this maze, never to be freed? She suddenly shook her head. No, I cannot be disturbed. This sword not only carried out the Tao of the bull demon, but it also contained Li Qingshan's understanding of the Tao of the heavenly demon. It could kill, but it could also destroy the heart. At this moment, Jiuying's body and mind were collapsing under the heavy pressure. However, with the powerful cultivation that she had accumulated over 1,000,000 years, she forcefully withstood the weight. Before the first sword stopped, another sword was raised. Second sword, Tiger Demon Bone Refinement Frenzy. The heavy gravity suddenly disappeared, and the tainted blood that had been pressed down suddenly rose into the air, floating in the air bit by bit. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Jiuying's long hair danced in the wind, but she felt the existence of the wind. The sound of the wind whistled into her ears and blew into her 36,000 pores. It was not the wind of the north, south, or east, but the destructive metal wind that contained the murderous aura of heaven and earth. The sound of the wind awakened even more distant memories. She had once fought on the battlefield with weapons in hand. Even though she was exiled in the end, that passion flowed in the blood of every ancestor. She wanted to jump up and fight with Li Qingshan at all costs. However, her abdomen moved, and she curled up her body again. She covered her abdomen with both hands, silently resisting the invasion of the metal wind. Blood flowed out from every pore, but it was not enough to destroy her body. She knew clearly in her heart that such swift and fierce sword force couldn't be sustained for long. Third sword, ape demon fishing for the moon, emptiness. The sound of the wind suddenly stopped, and the scenery changed. Everything around her disappeared, turning into a boundless emptiness, as if there was nothing. Emptiness was form, and form was emptiness. In a daze, she saw the children who lived as if they were floating and died as if they were resting. But in Li Qingshan's words, they were the walking corpses. Then she saw Jiuzi, who was filled with resentment towards her, cursing her death in the darkness. All of her efforts had turned to nothing. What was the point? This strike did not possess the destructive power of the previous two strikes, but it threw her mind into disorder, leaving her at a loss. Fourth sword, spirit turtle suppresses the seas, omens of good and ill fortune. The moment the illusion vanished, an omen of ill fortune descended. This strike was the sword of fate. It did not harm her at all, but it severed her destiny as the evil god of the demon domain and the ruler of the blood maze. It sealed up all of her heavenly blessings. Fifth sword, Phoenix's Nerva, undying heart. The phoenix's cry was clear, and her nature was noble and pure. The flames of her heart were inextinguishable, and the 5 virtues did not decline. She struggled in the raging flames. The color of the flames was like a red lotus, extremely pure and blazing. Even the surging blood could not extinguish it, as if it was the legendary karmic fire. Although she felt great pain, there was no anger or resentment in her heart. Instead, she was filled with guilt and remorse. It was as if she was not being tortured by the enemy, but was atoning for the sins she had committed. Sixth sword, Qilin's footsteps pity the common people. The flames extinguished, and darkness shrouded her. Even though she had lost many of her blessings because she had destroyed the Black Sun demon heart, this world was still formed by the primordial Qilin. In an instant, a wisp of the demon domains will descended and materialized into a black Qilin. Its iron hooves trampled down on her body mercilessly. Heaven and earth were heartless, and all living things were like straw dogs. The power of this strike was even greater than the previous ones. At this moment, it was not Li Qingshan who wanted to destroy her, but Mo Tian who wanted to destroy her. These 6 strikes were as fast as lightning, and they were almost continuous strikes. The sword style combined the 3 demon transformation and 3 god transformation, using the demon transformation to mess things up, and the god transformation to judge. When the black Qilin dissipated like smoke, Jiao Ying was already severely injured and sprawled on the ground. Her internal organs were severely injured, and all the bones in her body were crushed. She no longer had the strength to resist, and even her spiritual will was completely destroyed. It's time to end this. The last strike, Divine Dragon Heavenly Works Creation. This strike was not only the Divine Dragon Sword, but also the integration of the 7 god demon transformations. It stimulated all the remaining power in the small world to destroy all of Jiao Ying's vitality. As the sword fell, dragons soared and tigers leaped, scales flew, phoenixes danced, and bulls howled. At this moment, Jiao Ying suddenly stood up. Her face was covered in blood, and her expression was mournful. She desperately waved her hands to grab the blade of the sword. A deathbed struggle. The blade of the sword paused for a moment, and both her hands and arms were minced. However, taking advantage of this pause, she desperately stretched her neck and opened her mouth to bite the blade of the sword, making a loud clanging sound. Li Qingshan was surprised. Compared to the body, the head was an even more fatal point. However, he did not hesitate. He had poured all of his strength into the strike, so it was not something he could control either. Sword chi rushed towards the top of her head, and the light from the sword shot towards the bull. Jiao Ying could not help but open her mouth. With a turn of the sword, it plunged into her chest and severed her final sliver of vitality. Immediately, the surging tide of blood receded. Flesh, blood, and rotten flesh fell down with a rustle. The entire blood maze began to collapse. The demon folk were panic-stricken. The mushrooms they had plucked rapidly withered in their hands, giving off a foul smell. Li Qingshan had noticed a long time ago that her snake body was connected to the huge mushroom, becoming one with the entire blood maze. As a matter of fact, it could even be said that the entire blood maze was an extension of her body. Although she was immobilized because of this, giving him the opportunity to use his sword form, she basically possessed endless power. No matter how heavily injured she was, she could recover. If 7 consecutive strikes still could not kill her, then he would be the one dead right now. But now, the outcome had already been determined. He could not help but exhale deeply, using his remaining strength to slowly draw out the Xianyuan sword. The Jiao Ying suddenly moved again, actually holding on and refusing to die. She murmured to herself sorrowfully, "Was I wrong? My children, I just wanted to protect them, let them live well, not suffer hunger or cold, not be slaughtered. Was I wrong?" Li Qingshan remained silent. What could he do about it? They were demon folk after all. Suddenly, he heard a weak but powerful heartbeat, which also contained exuberant life force. He could not help but be stunned. That's impossible. He understood the power of the Xianyuan sword the best. The Jiao Ying was just experiencing a momentary recovery before death, so how could she still possess such life force? The Jiao Ying lowered her head. Her arms had already been shattered. She only rubbed her abdomen with a gentle gaze. "I see." Li Qingshan suddenly recalled that when the black Qilin stomped down, she had bent over and used her back to block the iron hooves, protecting the child in her belly. Even when the flames burned and the metal wind blew, she was still the same. In the end, she extended her hands and bit the edge of the sword, also protecting the child in her belly. Suddenly, an indescribable feeling welled up in her heart. Something seemed to shake violently. The Jiao Ying said feebly, "Please, spare him. He's not a demon folk yet." "What did you say?" Li Qingshan frowned. With a swing of the sword, he cut open her abdomen, and a loud cry rang out. A wet and wrinkled baby lay in the bloody womb of its mother. As if he had been struck by lightning, Li Qingshan suddenly became stunned. The infant was ugly, but he was not a demon folk. He was just a regular infant, the son of a human. The Xianyuan sword fell out of his hand. He extended his trembling hand and scooped up the infant from the womb. His hand was covered in blood, the scarlet red dazzling. The Jiao Ying stared at the infant blankly and began humming an ancient song again. It was gentle and indistinct, filled with tenderness and filled with a wondrous power. It made the infant stop crying and settle down. At the same time, the laws of the demon domain operated silently. Invisible demon Qi wanted to seep into the infant's body and bestow him with a demon heart, turning him into a true demon folk. "So, you haven't become a demon god?" Li Qingshan's voice was extremely exhausted, but he did not receive an answer. The gentle, indistinct song had already dispersed. "That's fantastic. That bitch is finally dead. We're all free. What do we do with this person? Obviously kill him. I want that sword. No, it's mine." The Jiao Ying evil god walked over from the collapsed blood palace. He chatted and laughed innocently, but it was also filled with chilling cruelty. They grew rapidly, bursting through their red undergarments. Their figures changed at every moment, becoming mature and vicious. They approached Li Qingshan step by step. Li Qingshan did not move at all, as if he did not hear anything. Suddenly he shook his head. His face was already covered in tears. "Look, we've scared this kid to tears." A vicious man sneered, leading to a roar of laughter. A seductive woman said, "I'd like to play with him." Li Qingshan hugged the infant and widened his scarlet eyes. He questioned the sky. "Buddha, even if all demon folk are guilty of heinous sins, are demon folk born as demon folk?" The heavens were speechless. His voice probably could not reach the land of ultimate bliss. All he saw was a black sun hanging high in the sky. "Then come at me." In that moment, the black sun fell, and the demon heart condensed, piercing through the endless space and arriving before him in a single moment. He swallowed it in a single gulp. The snake demon devours the sun and incinerates this body. Chapter 16:14. Qi Feiyang's demon heart of black sun flickered as it flowed down his throat and into his stomach. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. The wind blew. It was as if he had spat out a storm. The great wind swept through, blowing away the palaces of blood and the layers of flesh and blood. The blood maze collapsed loudly, and the sky of blood scattered, blown to smithereens by the great wind. The world suddenly opened up, and a boundless sky appeared above him. The wind did not stop, rising straight to the 9th layer. The weather changed, and the seas flowed. A black sun hurriedly shuttled through the sea of clouds, flickering as his emotions surged. The black sun illuminated the endless, desolate land, illuminating the 12 demon worlds. All the demon folk raised their heads. The 12 demon gods sensed something at the same time. Outside the region they controlled, in Jiao Ying's blood maze, something was being born. To their disbelief, the will of the demon domain that had always been chaotic and evil also celebrated, speeding up the growth of this thing. It was even willing to withdraw a portion of the laws they grasped. The Tang Valley Abyss, this was where the dwelling of the Chaos Demon God was. He was publicly recognized as the strongest among the 12 demon gods. The power and laws he grasped were even more powerful than the other 11 demon gods combined. Originally, he was the existence with the greatest chance of ascending to the demon domain. However, rumor had it that the laws of chaos had completely assimilated him, sinking into eternal chaos. He no longer possessed any rational thoughts. Today, as a portion of the laws of chaos were withdrawn, he suddenly recovered a sliver of clarity. He thought intermittently, the black sun, the descent, the prophecy. He had forgotten his surname a long time ago. He had forgotten why he had been exiled, but he still remembered the legend that had been passed down for a very long time, the prophecy regarding the demon heart of Black Sun and the demon god king. So, I'm not the person who prophesied. Afterwards, he sank into complete chaos, never to recover again. There was an unworthy scholar in the Hong family of the past who disguised himself as a traitor. He was fond of committing crimes and hiding. The world called him Chaos. Qingqi mountain demon god Qiongqi gazed at the flickering black sun and suddenly thought of the oath from many years ago. The tough kid who would rather die in battle than lower his head. Under the connection of fate from the blood oath of the Nether River, he was the first to determine Li Qingshan's identity. For a moment, 1,000 thoughts ran through his mind, and his face flickered. Suddenly, he began laughing recklessly. It's actually you. It really is you. He's finally here. I've been waiting for so long. Fortunately, you didn't disappoint me. Come, let me see how powerful this prophesied demon god king is. Laughter reverberated in the air. It had been a long time since he had felt so happy, and it also contained a cruel killing intent. Jin Yun Restaurant, the Thai demonic god, first showed a stunned expression, but then it turned into a natural smile. Even though the smile was a little gloomy, it said, "No wonder you are the chosen one." No matter what his temperament was, he still had an unparalleled talent. Determination returned to his pale face, and he put on the bronze mask again. He looked at the bull totem on the wall and held the short spear with both hands. His eyes were filled with determination. Then I will fight for Shenong once more, and for the last time, before I am completely changed. There was also demon god Jia, demon god Chang Liang, demon god Bai Wu. The demon gods all had different thoughts as they looked into the distance, waiting for the moment the prophecy would come true. At the same time, within Li Qingshan's body, there was an astonishing change. A long snake appeared out of thin air with a black sun in its mouth, shuttling back and forth in the void. This was the newborn snake demon. The divine dragon immediately soared into the sky. Dragon and snake race. The snake grows 1 inch, the dragon grows 1 inch. The snake grows 1 foot, the dragon grows 1 foot. It seemed like they were fighting endlessly, but also seemed like they were mating. Li Qingshan suddenly recalled the magnificent picture of the battle of mending the heavens, the Fuxi clan and the Nuwa clan, the dragon and the snake. The dragon and the snake intertwined and gradually merged into one, and it was difficult to tell them apart. Primordial creation, yin and yang merge. The small world shook violently, rotated and changed. 4 gods and 4 demons, all kinds of changes appeared and disappeared one by one. The dragon was yang, the snake was yin. The Qilin transformed, The ape was the void. The ox, the phoenix, the tiger, and the turtle, the earth, fire, wind, and water. In an instant, all the changes of the gods and demons merged into one. Standing in the center of the storm, Li Qingshan felt that the body of the god and demon was also breaking apart. The small world expanded infinitely, breaking the boundary between his spirit and body, and connecting with the whole world. The broken body of the god and demon was reconstructed in an instant. The small world no longer existed, and everything between heaven and earth became his small world. At this moment he was like the legendary torch dragon, seeing as day, roaring as night, blowing as winter, and exhaling as summer. Exhaling like the wind, and shouting like thunder. One was active and the other was still, following the rotation of yin and yang. With every breath he became stronger. A straight path led to the true God realm of refining the spirit to return to the void. The Jiuzi evil god suddenly felt a wave of fear. He felt that some kind of shocking change was happening in Li Qingshan's body. If this change was completed, they would all be dead. They rushed forward at the same time. Kill him! Li Qingshan silently opened his eyes. They were still a pair of red eyes, but the sclera of his eyes had become pitch black. Red like fire, black like night, like the stars in the night sky. This was Yinghua. In the distant 9 heavens, there were not many stars. Each star was the manifestation of the gods and Buddhas in the sky, including the 12 demon gods. It was just that their brilliance was dim and they were shrouded in black shadows. Suddenly, a small red star faintly shone through the dark night, shining with a demonic light. That red star was very small and could not be compared to any other star. However, the moment it appeared, it made the stars lose their color, and they were shocked and terrified. Yinghua fire, confusion. With the appearance of the demon star, the world would be in disaster, and the war would be endless. The curtains of the great calamity of the world were slowly opening. In those Yinghua eyes, what was revealed was demonic nature, divinity, or humanity. In Li Qingshan's vision, everything seemed to have lost its color. The Jiuzi evil gods were pouncing over, some to snatch the Xianyuan sword beside him, some to attack the gap where his broken arm was, and some even targeted the baby in his arms. Their minds were connected, and they were one. Their attacks were as fast as lightning, and their attacks were unusually fierce, but they all stopped at this moment. Li Qingshan's eyes turned, and he even had the spare time to observe the expressions on their faces. However, there was nothing to see, and they were all equally detestable. The broken arm was a little itchy, and the bones pierced out and flesh grew. In an instant, an arm was formed, and it was covered with a layer of fine scales. The cultivation of the Qilin transformation, sword, and before the arm was completely formed, it had already reached the 9th level. He had already obtained the complete will inheritance of the primeval Qilin, and even the power of the Xianyuan sword could not stop the broken arm from regrowing. He blinked again and everything returned to color, and he stretched out the new arm. Chapter 16:15. Li Qingshan casually crushed the head of an evil god, but evil gods were so tough. Let alone having their heads blown off, even if they were torn to pieces, they could still recover. Only a divine weapon like the Xianyuan sword would be able to kill him in one strike. However, the evil god's headless body swayed a few times before collapsing on the ground, rotting and withering like vegetation. The other 9 evil gods paled in fright, suddenly coming to a halt. From the will of the evil god, whose head had been blown off, came an indescribable terror that he had never experienced in his life. What's going on? This feeling, what's going on? Terrifying. So terrifying. Fear grew madly, and it infected one another through the mental connection. No one actually dared to take another step forward. Instead, they retreated step by step as they trembled uncontrollably. This was the terror of death. Unlike regular demon folk, they had never experienced the feeling of struggling on the edge of life and death as they were born in the blood maze. Under Jiao Ying's care, they grew into evil gods step by step, possessing an endless lifespan. Afterwards, they began to resent Jiao Ying for trapping them here, preventing them from doing whatever they wanted in the vaster world. Even though they possessed strength that completely surpassed regular evil gods, in Li Qingshan's eyes, they paled even more in comparison to the white dolphin evil god. Battles in the cultivation community had never just been a clash of strength, but also a clash of wills. These noble, extraordinary descendants of gods seemed powerful and cunning, but they had actually spent their entire lives wrapped in a warm, soft womb. They were even more foolish and cowardly than the lowliest demon folk. Once they encountered a true challenge, they would all show their true colors. As you wish, you've come to this world. Welcome, welcome. Li Qingshan said indifferently, afterwards, witness the cruelty of the world, and then you can die. His bewildered eyes no longer paid attention to these evil gods. Instead, they gazed in the distant direction of Qingqi Mountain. He did not need anyone to lead the way. There was nothing he did not know about the demon domain. He had already clearly sensed demon god Qiongqi's killing intent. That was the enemy he was about to face. He raised his head again. His true opponent was even higher up in the 9 heavens, the Elysium. Right now, perhaps he was looking down on him. As for these good-for-nothings in front of him, he would just slap them to death. With a casual wave of his hand, another evil god was smashed to pieces. Organs and bones scattered through the air as blood splattered the faces of the other evil gods. They were all scared silly, their eyes widening as they watched Li Qingshan walk over step by step blankly. A black qilin was faintly discernible, carrying destruction as it slowly walked over. The evil gods tried to gather their courage, but how could people who had never experienced fear have such a thing? They dared to betray Jiao Ying because they knew that they would not be punished. In fact, they didn't even have the guts to run away, let alone resist. They were afraid of becoming Li Qingshan's first target. The evil gods were filled with regret. They regretted betraying their mother, regretted coming to this world, and missed their life in the Blood Palace. However, it was too late. The terrifying man strode over. Stop. Don't move. I order you as an evil god. An evil god roared, but his body was retreating. Bang. Li Qingshan slapped him to death and moved on to the next one. Sir, I can serve you. I'm useful to you. An evil god said fawningly. Bang. Li Qingshan slapped him to death and moved on to the next one. I beg you, don't kill me, I don't want to die. An evil god knelt on the ground and begged. Bang. Li Qingshan slapped him to death and moved on to the next one. One after another, it was even easier than swatting flies. At least flies knew how to run. As for them, they just stood where they were, waiting for Li Qingshan to kill them. All they could do was spout some useless nonsense. Every time one died, the terror before death would explode in the hearts of the remaining people like a bomb. As for some, they couldn't even speak. They hugged their heads and laughed foolishly. They were scared out of their wits. In the blink of an eye, the 9 evil gods were all dead, and only one was left. The last survivor curled his sturdy body into a ball. As Li Qingshan's figure approached, he gradually turned from a savage and malevolent man back into a child. He screamed, "Mommy, I want mommy." That appearance was like a pitiful and innocent child. Anyone who saw him would treat Li Qingshan as a murderous demon king. Li Qingshan stood still and let out an indiscernible sigh. He also felt like a murderous demon king. He raised his right leg and stomped down. The 9 evil gods were crushed. From then on, the 9 evil gods were all annihilated, and the blood maze collapsed. Qian Rongji witnessed everything and had an intoxicated look on her face. What a wonderful fate! Looking at Li Qingshan's lonely back view, she licked her lips. This was probably more painful than being bitten by her. The moment Li Qingshan swallowed the demon heart of the Black Sun, the demonic sky had poured endless heavenly favor onto her as compensation for what she had done. She had completed her mission and offered the only offering. He would definitely cause the 6 paths of reincarnation and the boundless world to fall into endless chaos. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but laugh until tears flowed down. Li Qingshan looked at her deeply and placed the baby in his arms on the ground. Take good care of him. And then? Li Qingshan didn't reply and walked towards Qingqi Mountain alone. He suddenly thought of the scene when he first met Gu Yenying and the feeling of love at first sight. Actually, what he truly loved was the feeling of being free and unrestrained. The current her was probably already soaring and roaming the skies of the demonic beast path. However, fate had given him a path to walk. Then let's go. He no longer looked up at the sky and looked at the ground beneath his feet as he walked forward step by step. In the great silence, he could hear his own heartbeat again. A black sun devil heart throbbed violently, sending endless, abyss-like demonic power to every part of his body. The scarlet flew with the wind and instantly grew several times longer, blazing like fire in the violent wind. His feet sank as if he was carrying something heavier than a mountain on his back. He arched his back and his body swelled inch by inch, but he clenched his teeth and suppressed the violent magic power in his body. Every inch of his body contained explosive power. He could destroy a mountain with one finger and sever a river with one strand of hair. The black mystical prints started to stretch out from his chest. They grew like vines and spread out like ink marks, densely intersecting with each other on his chest. They formed a profound and mysterious pattern on his back. They were all manifestations of the laws of the demon domain. The mystical patterns interweaved on his face as if he had applied a layer of battle makeup, making him look even more inhuman. However, there were two black mystical patterns hanging down from the bottom of his eyes like tear stains. His fangs protruded and his horns curved like the moon. He was also hideous and disgusting. As he expected, this black sun demon heart didn't just give him power. It also gave him the chaos, evil, resentment, and heavy fate that had accumulated in this demonic land for billions of years. There were endless sins waiting for him in front of him, and this was the path he had chosen. Leaving a deep footprint, he walked forward again. Even when the thunder rumbled in the sky, he didn't hesitate. Chapter 1616. Mount Qingqi pierced through the clouds, reaching a height of 18,000 feet. It was the highest peak in the demonic domain. Demon god Qiongqi had used his divine power to pull it up inch by inch so that he could look into the distance. Even if one raised their head and looked at it from afar, they would have the illusion that the mountain was about to collapse. The mountain was majestic and magnificent, hence the name Mount Qingqi. Qiongqi liked bustling and fun, so Qingqi Mountain was never lonely. The dwellings of the 12 evil gods under his command were built in the mountain as well. At the foot of the mountain was a colossal demonic city, home to hundreds of millions of demon folk. At this moment, all of the demon folk walked onto the streets, paying their respects to the top of the mountain. They were tightly packed together, mumbling incantations and prostrating themselves repeatedly. As far as the eye could see, one could only see a sea of black heads that resembled ants. Qiongqi was standing on the rooftop of the mountain, looking into the distance. The corners of his mouth were raised high, as if they were about to crack open. His smile was evil and strange. He opened his arms, and the surging power of faith surged towards him, pushing his god power to an unimaginable level. The 12 evil gods gathered behind him. They were suppressed by this divine power and retreated another 1,000 feet. They looked at each other in dismay. Although they sensed some sort of change, it was not as clear as the demon gods. They did not know why there was such a huge commotion. Could it be that Zhenwu Great Emperor had personally led the deities into the demonic area? Otherwise, even if a true immortal descended, he would not dare to trespass into the demonic domain, let alone attack the abode of a demon god. That was no different from courting death. Only a god king, like Great Emperor Zhenwu, could force the demon gods into such a predicament. However, if Zhenwu the Great had descended to the mortal world to fight against the demons, the 12 demonic gods should have joined forces to set up the 12 citadel demon-killing formation to defend themselves. How could they have sent Qiongqi to fight alone? Puzzled, he saw that Qiongqi seemed to be in a good mood, so he asked boldly, "Sir, what happened?" "The black sun has really descended," demon god Qiongqi announced loudly. However, he was not answering the demon god behind him. Instead, he was speaking to the other demon gods. "Are you ready to welcome our king?" Other than the Chaos demon god and the Taotai demon god, all of them were prepared to kill their king. Only a king who could not be strangled by his subjects could be considered a king. Even the Taotai demon god had tried to kill it. The strong preyed on the weak was the supreme law of the demon realm. When Li Qingshan's figure appeared on the horizon, Qiongqi jumped up happily and cheered like a child. "Come on, let's see how you're going to push down Qingqi Mountain." They had heard the prophecy of the demon heart. They had also heard the prophecy. That person was still 1,000 miles away, but he felt the shadow spreading towards him and enveloping the entire Qingqi Mountain. He felt suffocated. He couldn't help but raise his head and look over. It was as though he saw Emotion's incarnation. Without any hesitation, they turned into 12 rays of demonic light and flew back into the cavern. The long, demonic city formation. With one. And by it by the into of sect. By the core. With 100 with the 108 divine halls in the demonic city as nodes, an even larger formation enveloped the entire demonic city. Demon god Qiongqi was the supreme ruler of the Qiongqi demon world. He possessed the timing, while Qingqi Mountain possessed the geography. The 12 demon gods and the hundreds of millions of demon folk worshipped together to form the harmony of people. The three formations merged into one, gathering the three elements of heaven, earth, and man, forming an indestructible fortress. In the 12 palaces, the 12 demon gods sat high up on their thrones. They firmly believed that even the person who possessed the legend of the demon heart of Black Sun would be dead if he ran into them. Before absolute power, how can legends become reality? Li Qingshan finally stopped. The tribulation clouds above him were as vast as the sea, but strangely, not a single bolt of lightning fell. Thunder rumbled by his ears, like a chariot running over a chariot. It was an ominous omen. However, he did not even raise his head. Up ahead was where the enemy was. He immediately smiled viciously. With that smile, he could no longer suppress the violent power in his chest. It rushed out of his lungs and his throat, erupting like a volcano, turning into a wild roar. Boom! The heavens and the earth lost their color. There was only a wild roar that was incomparably heroic and glorious. It destroyed everything that stood in its way, whether it was the undulating mountain ridges or the lush forests, everything was crushed in the glory. The wild roar immediately swept through 1,000 kilometers, violently slamming into the outermost defensive formation of the demonic city. The defensive formation twisted and collapsed at a visible rate. In just a few seconds, it had burst like a soap bubble. The tall buildings immediately collapsed, and millions of demon folk were reduced to dust. However, the violent energy showed no signs of weakening. Afterwards, it slammed into the protective formation of Qingqi Mountain. Like the breath of a furious dragon, it did not break through from a single point. Instead, it broke through from all directions. Even Li Qingshan was unable to control this power completely. All he could do was unleash it to his heart's content. Not only did it contain power, but it also contained the fury and hatred that the demon domain had accumulated for millions of years. As long as he wanted to, he could unleash it forever. The entire demon domain was his miniature world. From a certain perspective, the power merely flowed through his body. The 12 evil gods were dumbfounded. Their eyes were filled with glorious light. The protective formation also collapsed in a single moment, followed by their degraded 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. So-called formations were just some sort of manifestation of the laws of the world, while Li Qingshan was the incarnation of the demonic sky. He completely negated all formations. The timing was useless, the geography was useless, and the people were useless. The world is useless. Li Qingshan took a step forward, and the violent energy rushed towards Qiongqi on the top of the mountain. Tisk, these pieces of trash really can't stop you. Qiongqi's eyes were filled with glory. With a wave of his hand, the violent energy immediately rushed into the sky. All the demon folk could see a resplendent star rise up when they raised their heads, flickering in the night sky. You haven't even reached spiritual restoration yet, so you can't harm me with tricks like this. Li Qingshan could negate formations, but he could not negate a demon god. Qiongqi had reached spiritual restoration a long time ago, while the true demon god king had to be at spiritual restoration and integration with the void. Only then could they easily strip him of the laws he grasped. At this moment, there was a rumble, and the tribulation clouds split open. A figure condensed and flashed, turning into a human figure. He resembled a strong man, with a bare belly and a pair of wings on his back. He had 3 eyes on his forehead, and his face was scarlet like a monkey's. His feet were like eagle claws, and he wielded a wedge in his left hand and a mallet in his right. The Lord of Thunder. The 7th heavenly tribulation was different from the past. Once they underwent it, they would become true immortals, truly unkillable. They could ascend to the 9 heavens and become the legitimate gods of the heavenly palace. When they underwent the tribulation, the Lord of Thunder would descend, representing the heavenly palace in a test. If it was a righteous master, the lightning would slow down slightly. If it was a heretic, the lightning would surge. At this moment, the Lord of Thunder stared at Li Qingshan from above. His face was filled with fury. Chapter 16-17. Li Qingshan raised his head and smiled as if he was welcoming an old friend. Only by going through 7 heavenly tribulations and cultivating his spirit to return to the void could he truly fight with Qiongqi. He even felt a sense of familiarity towards the thunder god's murderous intent and anger. He had seen too many of such expressions along the way. At least it proved that he was a threat to them. However, the next moment, lightning intertwined and the sky turned into a blazing pool of lightning. Many lightning shadows appeared from within. Every lightning shadow was a thunder god. There were a total of 36 of them, all dressed in the same attire and the same anger. Demon god Qiongqi was also slightly taken aback. Then he burst into laughter. Good fella, all 36 thunder gods of the Thunder Division have come out. I wonder which god of the Thunder Division will be the commander. Stop hiding and come out. There were the Thunder Division, Fire Division, Plague Division, and so on in the Heavenly Palace. They had different duties, and the Thunder Division was the most important. It was in charge of disasters and blessings, in charge of things and people, and in charge of life and death. Not only did it decide whether thousands of cultivators could become perfected immortals, but it also had the authority to control the heavenly thunder and kill evil demons. There were a total of 36 thunder gods, the number of heavenly spirits. When ordinary immortals underwent their tribulations, there was only one thunder god. This time, Li Qingshan's tribulation had attracted all the thunder gods. From Qiongqi's words, there was also a true god who came to command. It seemed like he would not stop until Li Qingshan was killed here. As expected, before he finished speaking, a god descended on the pool of lightning. He held a mace in one hand and a talisman in the other. His expression was stern and his armor was strict. The general of the 9th heaven thunder god is here. Under the orders of the golden palace of Haoyan, the Jade Emperor, and the universal heavenly lord, I am here to destroy the demon star. His gaze landed on Li Qingshan. I'll give you a piece of advice. Surrender immediately, and you might still have a chance at survival. Otherwise, you will be turned into ashes when the heavenly thunder strikes. You will waste your cultivation. He did not care about Qiongqi's provocation at all. The winner did not need to listen to the cry of a loser. Only Li Qingshan made him feel a trace of fear. Otherwise, he would not have tried to surrender and would have just killed him with lightning. Above the 9 heavens, the group of stars flickered, and they were like numerous cold and sharp eyes staring at the dim crimson star. Wind blew from all directions, and thunder rumbled from all directions. The gods would be enraged and the demons would hate him. This was the fate that Li Qingshan had chosen. However, the smile on his face became even wider. Unless you get that heavenly Lord Jade Emperor you speak of to give up his seat for me, I will not stop fighting. Stubbornly persisting in going about things the wrong way is courting your own destruction. The 9th heaven thunder god general's expression turned cold as he glared angrily. Set up the formation. Slay the demons. Yes, sir. The 36 thunder gods answered in unison. Boom. The lightning pool boiled, and the 36 thunder gods formed the 36 celestial dipper formation. A formless energy instantly enveloped the area. Li Qingshan had goosebumps all over his body, not because of anger or fear, but because he had been sucked into a vast electrostatic field. However, to him now, not being able to control his body, even if it was just the tip of his hair, was a very serious problem. He was like the incarnation of the demonic sky, and the entire demonic domain had become his small world. However, there was some kind of power that had surpassed his control and was affecting and controlling him. In an instant, billions of electric currents that were 10,000 times thinner than a strand of hair continuously flowed through his body and divine soul. At every moment, he was enduring great damage that he could not resist and could not escape from. 10,000 arrows piercing the heart, and a group of snakes biting the body, it was hard to describe the pain. If it was an ordinary human immortal, he would have been killed in an instant, and not even a trace would be left. On Mount Qingqi, Qiongqi had a grave expression. Even he did not dare to walk into the range of the heavenly tribulation. Otherwise, it would make the heavenly tribulation even more terrifying and violent. The ninth heaven thunder god general did not mind killing a demon god along the way. As expected, the laws represented by the heavenly tribulation are higher than the laws of the demonic domain. Li Qingshan muttered to himself. Originally, these thunder gods were only human immortals, equivalent to the 6 deities and 6 armor generals of the desireless heavenly palace. Even if they were in a formation, he would not care. However, with the unprecedented 7 heavenly tribulations, each of them was in an invincible position and possessed extraordinary power. Those who were going through the heavenly tribulation could only passively accept the test. If they could endure it, they would soar into the sky and become immortals. If they could not, they would be smashed into pieces, and their divine soul would be destroyed. However, was that really the case? Who was the one who set such a test? Who was the one who destroyed the truth that Nuwa created humans? What right do you have to judge me? Li Qingshan clenched his fist firmly and threw a punch at the gods of the thunder tribe high above. The ape demon fishing the moon pierced through the void, but it ignored the thunder gods and punched at the ninth heaven thunder god general. The ninth heaven thunder god general frowned and did not dodge. A halo appeared behind his head and emitted a faint divine light to block the punch. This divine light was not only formed by his divine power, but it was also supported by the power of faith. As a righteous god of the heavenly court, he had countless statues in temples and was worshipped by people from all over the world. This divine light was almost indestructible and unbreakable. Break! The ox demon trembled and shattered the void. The void shook for billions of times and shattered the divine light. The punch landed on the ninth heaven thunder god general's face. General! The 36 thunder gods' expressions changed. Their expressions were so ugly that it was as if they had been punched in the face. This scene was too shocking for them, and they almost forgot to join forces to fight against Li Qingshan. The ninth heaven thunder god general's head was raised high in the air. He was stunned. How many years had it been since someone could hurt him? Or rather, with his status, no one dared to attack him. A stream of blood flowed out of his nose. He touched it and his hand was bright red. His head was still shaking violently, and he did not know how to organize his words. How dare you? How did you? So, even gods bleed. Li Qingshan sneered. Idiot, you are not within the rules of the heavenly tribulation. At this realm, all battles were essentially a battle of the rules, which was the so-called Battle of the Great Tao. Only when the Great Tao couldn't determine who was superior could they talk about fighting. As the incarnation of the demonic sky, Li Qingshan had supreme authority in the demonic domain. However, he was limited by his cultivation and could not suppress a demonic god like Qiongqi. After all, a demonic god also had high authority and was the controller of the demonic domain's rules. Although the thunder gods were not powerful, usually just regular human immortals, their temporary authority was even greater than Li Qingshan's due to the heavenly tribulation. They were basically undefeatable. The ninth heaven thunder god general's cultivation was far greater than the thunder gods, but it was exactly because of this that he could not merge with the heavenly tribulation. He could only descend as an individual, and he was not a controller of the demon domain's rules like demon god Qiongqi either. Instead, he was suppressed by the demon domain's rules, which immediately gave him a slap in the face. Once they were suppressed on the level of laws, even true immortals were nothing more than that. As for power, the power that a mere god possessed was merely a drop in the ocean compared to the boundless demon domain. And what was so-called faith compared to the resentment and anger that demon folk had accumulated for millions of years? The ninth heaven thunder god general returned to his senses and said furiously, "Kill him! Kill him immediately!" Bang! Before he could even finish, he was punched in the face again. "What bullshit thunder god are you? Come. I'll teach you how to behave." Li Qingshan threw punch after punch at the ninth heaven thunder god general. Based on the principle that he had to hit someone in the face, he greeted his face with every punch. Before long, the ninth heaven thunder god general's face had swelled up. His hair was disheveled, and he was in a horrible shape. He no longer possessed the awe-inspiring bearing he had just now. Even the gods and devils who were paying attention to the scene felt their faces hurt. Chapter 16:18. If it were any other demon god, they might be afraid of Li Qingshan's power and think of ways to kill him. However, Qiongqi would never do that, because he was a novelty hunter through and through. He hated all the rules and etiquette that he was used to. Good and evil, right and wrong, high and low. If they were not the opinions of ordinary people, they would be the hypocritical words of holy immortals and Buddhas. That was why he made a Nether River blood oath with Li Qingshan, even if he did not have to take any risks as a god. Now that a demon god was beating up a true god, how could he not laugh in joy? Even if he was going to be beaten up like this? Perhaps that would be interesting too, huh? In the endless pool of lightning in the sky, the 36 thunder gods looked anxious as they continuously hit the golden drum and waved their hammer. Thousands of lightning bolts descended from the sky and violently bombarded Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's skin was already charred, and his scarlet hair turned to ash, but he did not care at all. Only his scarlet eyes flashed with a fluorescent light as he stared at the thunder god general of the ninth heaven and beat him fiercely. Of course, his opponent was a true god after all. Even if he was restricted by the rules of the demon domain, he could not cause any fatal damage. However, the thunder god general of the ninth heaven felt deeply hurt. This is too much. With a roar, dazzling lightning suddenly exploded from his body, and his body rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a giant god of thunder and descended from the sky with a loud bang. His godly might filled the world. His body was like a mountain that was more than 10,000 feet tall and was still expanding. Blazing lightning interweaved all over his body, and his eyes were filled with lightning. The whites of his eyes had disappeared, and he gave off an inhuman divinity. His voice boomed like thunder. "Li Qingshan, I did not want to do this myself, but you are seeking death." Li Qingshan's body was pitch black from head to toe. The ground under his feet was melted by the lightning, turning into a boiling sea of magma. Heat waves distorted the air, and the sound of thunder drowned out. However, amidst the lightning and fire, the smile on his face did not change. Looking up at the giant god of thunder, he suddenly shook his body. His charred skin broke and peeled off, turning into ashes in the heat waves and sparks. There wasn't a single scar on the newly grown skin. Only complex black runes covered the perfect god-fiend body, filled with berserk power. He stood in the sea of fire, his waist-length hair fluttering like fire. He was like a nirvana phoenix, or an immortal demon king. The 36 thunder gods were shocked. They'd formed the great heavenly dipper formation and continued to bombard him. Even a mountain would be shattered and flattened, yet it seemed to be unable to harm him at all. Even his aura didn't weaken in the slightest. Instead, it became even more tyrannical and tyrannical. In fact, Li Qingshan wanted to thank them. The power brought by the Black Sun demon heart was too great. It was as if the entire infernal domain was about to be stuffed into his body. Fortunately, he had mastered the 9 transformations of demons and gods, and externalized the small world in his body, preventing himself from exploding. Even so, this power was still violent and difficult to control. The negative energy contained in it, such as anger, resentment, and pain, was eroding his mind at every moment, turning him into a tool to take revenge on the gods and Buddhas in the heavens, a monster full of resentment. Naturally, Li Qingshan wouldn't accept it. Although this was the fate he'd chosen, he wouldn't let it be controlled by anything. On one hand, it was his stubborn and arrogant self-will. On the other hand, it was the hatred of all living beings in the infernal domain. Not only did his inner struggle not calm down because he decided to swallow the Black Sun demon heart, he became even more anxious. In every instant, billions of thoughts were born and extinguished. Hate and love, gods and demons, cruelty and mercy, revenge and forgiveness. From the distant past to the eternal future. A roar destroyed Qingshan's defense system. It was just a small venting, slightly alleviating the anxiety. It wasn't until the true God descended and the tribulation lightning fell that he finally heaved a sigh of relief. The tribulation lightning could dispel spiritual power and render all spells and treasures ineffective. It was the nightmare of those who went through the tribulation. However, it came just in time for him. It greatly alleviated the berserk power, making it easier to control. The Thunder God General of the Ninth Heaven, a true God-level living target, could also release the hatred and rage in his heart. Heaven and earth were the furnace, and creation was the work. Yin and yang were the charcoal, and creation was the copper. The threat of pain that the weak feared was the best training and fulfillment for him. That was why he wasn't afraid of the Thunder God General's majestic might. Instead, he mocked, "Great God, are you finally willing to come down personally? Are you prepared to die here?" The Thunder God General roared, "Look above you." Originally, he was only there to command, transcending the lightning with his control over the laws of lightning. He didn't get involved personally. After being beaten up by Li Qingshan, he was truly infuriated. He stepped into the battlefield, wanting to fight to the death with Li Qingshan. The tribulation clouds hung low above the giant god of lightning's head, sweeping and expanding as he descended. In the blink of an eye, it covered thousands of miles of demonic soil, but all the lightning was concentrated in this small area. It was no longer a pool of lightning, but an ocean of lightning. A dragon's roar came from the deep sea. Suddenly, a dragon's head peeked down from the clouds, but its tail wandered thousands of miles away. Its entire body was made of blazing lightning, stretching for thousands of miles. Li Qingshan revealed a solemn expression. Just listening to the mighty dragon's roar made him feel numb all over, and he couldn't muster any strength. The laws of the demonic domain were also being ruthlessly suppressed. Without a doubt, this lightning dragon was enough to destroy him. In fact, a single strike would be enough to destroy his soul and doom him eternally. This is the great Tao Heavenly Dragon. The moment the dragon's roar rang out, Qiongqi completely concealed his aura to avoid becoming a target. However, the smile on his face became even more excited. Tribulation lightning weapon condensation was far from the ultimate form of the heavenly tribulation. Naturally, the thunder gods weren't either. Legend had it that when a god attempted to merge with the void and undergo 8 heavenly tribulations, the great Tao Heavenly Dragon would descend to test if a god was qualified to become a representative of the great Tao. In this process, be it a god or a true immortal, all the laws that they controlled would be crushed. This was the final and most deadly test. Even a true immortal would not dare to take this step lightly. If they succeeded, they would become a king among gods and a saint among demons. If they failed, they would die, and all traces of their existence would be erased. What immortality? What divine might? It would all be but a dream. With the appearance of the great Tao Heavenly Dragon, the 36 thunder gods revealed pained expressions. They could no longer control such violent lightning, but the dragon's might was unbearable. The heavenly tribulation quickly escalated with the arrival of the Thunder God General of the Ninth Heaven. If this continued, even they would become targets and all of them would perish here. However, there was no dissatisfaction in their hearts. If their master was humiliated, their subjects would die. The Thunder God General of the Ninth Heaven had suffered such humiliation, and he had to avenge himself. The Thunder God General waved his hand. All of you back off. The demon planet of Mars is indeed not to be underestimated. It is no longer something you can interfere with. Sir. The 36 Thunder Gods replied in unison, turning into lightning and dispersing. They glanced at Li Qingshan one last time, and the anger on their faces had turned into fear. There was even a frightening thought in their minds. Was the general going to perish here? Li Qingshan felt some respect for the Great Tao Heavenly Dragon, because the target of the Great Tao Heavenly Dragon was not him, but the Thunder God General of the Ninth Heaven. The Great Tao Heavenly Dragon was an existence that killed gods and immortals. It did not care if one was a god or not. Even the gods of the Thunder Division who dared to disrupt the order of the Heavenly Tribulation had to be punished. If they could not destroy Li Qingshan in time and end the Heavenly Tribulation, he would be the one destroyed by the Great Tao Heavenly Dragon. With a dragon's roar, the heavens and earth shook. The Great Tao Heavenly Dragon descended, and its target was the Thunder God General of the Ninth Heaven. The Thunder God of the Nine Heavens raised the lightning truncheon high into the air and lured the Dragon of Heaven of the Great Way into his body, immediately suppressing the laws of the demon domain that Li Qingshan controlled. His eyes, ears, mouth, and nose all emitted extremely resplendent lightning. If I can't kill you here today, then I'll naturally die. All right, then I will fulfill your wish. The sea of lava beneath Li Qingshan exploded violently. Chapter 1619. Under the watchful eyes of the gods and demons, the lightning and fire were unleashed endlessly. The Thunder God General was covered in lightning and swayed violently. Then he stood firmly in the sky. A dragon shadow coiled around him, constantly devouring him and at the same time being used by him. Li Qingshan had disappeared. The Great Tao Heavenly Dragon suppressed the laws of the demonic domain he controlled in an instant. Then, it completely shattered him, almost killing him. Under such circumstances, no matter what kind of mystical ability or dharma spell, even the Phoenix's nirvana, it was completely useless. The lightning interweaved thousands of times in an instant. Even if he was reborn 100 times, he would still be destroyed 100 times. But there was no joy on the Thunder God General's face. Instead, he frowned. Although he knew that the Fiend Star would not die so easily, it was still far beyond his expectations that it would be so difficult to deal with. The scarlet star in the sky continued to shine. After being killed, Li Qingshan had instead become omnipresent, scattering his specks of consciousness and burying it deep underground. Do you want to avoid this? Dream on. The Thunder God General suddenly knelt on one knee. He held the thunder mace with both hands and stabbed it into the ground. Boom! Volcanoes erupted, lightning shot into the sky, and lava flowed. The ground shook as if it was about to shatter. Volcanoes rose, and thousands of rivers of fire flowed. The sky was filled with tribulation clouds, illuminated by the rivers of lava. The sky seemed to be burning. At the end of the horizon, the fire clouds and the sea of fire merged. It was no longer possible to distinguish the boundary between heaven and earth. This doomsday-like scene caused the spectating gods and devils to tremble slightly. Demon god Xiongqi was so excited that he trembled. Was this the prelude to the Great Tribulation? The giant god of lightning that the Thunder Lord of the Nine Heavens had transformed into knelt on one knee in the center of the sea of fire. With the lightning truncheon in his hand as the center, rings of lightning surged through the ground, wiping out Li Qingshan's specks of consciousness. He wanted to completely obliterate him, but even more consciousnesses rose up from the endless depths of the earth. But in this trembling sea of fire, there were always pieces of broken pure land that had not been devoured by the lava or burned by the flames. Thus, the specks of consciousness rose from the depths of the earth and turned into seeds. They broke through the earth's crust and sprouted one after another. A tender shoot grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, a small yellow flower bloomed and a green fruit formed. The flower withered, and the fruit swelled up as if it was inflated. There were black patterns on the green skin, and it turned out to be a big watermelon. With a crack, the watermelon split open, and a tiny, naked Li Qingshan walked out of it. He said, "Don't be anxious. Only after some time can the flowers bloom in spring and the fruits of autumn, and when the melon is ripe, the stalk will fall. Before he could finish speaking, a bolt of lightning swept past and erased him along with the melon vine. However, at the same time, more miniature Li Qingshan walked out from watermelons, winter melons, pumpkins, loofahs, pumpkins, and other melons. As soon as Li Qingshan exchanged blows with the thunder god of the ninth heaven, he knew that it was impossible for him to fight him head-on. Without the enhancement of the demon domain's nomological laws, the thunder god of the ninth heaven could suppress him with his divine power alone. Coupled with the great Tao heavenly dragon, it could not be called a battle. It was a one-sided massacre. If that's the case, I'll let you kill me. Thus, he spread his thoughts across the earth. This was not some cloning technique. One flower, one world. Every seed contained his entire being, and they all had their own independent will. Bam! A pomegranate exploded, and hundreds of miniature Li Qingshan popped out. Each of them was about the size of a pomegranate seed, and they could ride on ants. These miniature Li Qingshan did not have time to grow, and they were much weaker than normal clones. This could be seen from their size. In comparison, even if the giant god of thunder was half kneeling on the ground, he was still an insurmountable mountain. The miniature Li Qingshan could barely see the top of the mountain even if their necks were about to break. However, they still looked proud and shouted at the giant god of thunder. "Come and kill me, idiot!" Heavenly punishment. The thunder god of the ninth heaven roared, and billions of lightning bolts swept across the earth. All the Li Qingshan were killed by the lightning, and all the plants were reduced to ashes. However, in the blink of an eye, green sprouts sprouted, grew strong, and bloomed. One by one, Li Qingshan jumped out and shouted at the god with their tiny voices. Each of them only had a short lifespan, even shorter than a mayfly that was born in the morning and died in the evening. Like a spark, they would be extinguished. However, there would always be new lives born from this land. The wildfire could not be extinguished, and life would be born again with the spring wind. The Qilin was endless. The giant god of thunder roared, and without mercy he slaughtered in a frenzy. The 9 evil gods' minds were connected. After a few of their brothers died, their will collapsed. However, in this instant, Li Qingshan had already experienced billions of deaths, and they were all his own deaths. There was no substitute, no escape. He could only silently endure the endless terror and pain, just like this demon domain. Death could not be avoided, and the pain would never end. The newly born tiny Li Qingshan gradually stopped shouting. They were born silently and died silently. They even stopped looking up at the giant god of thunder, and their heads were lowered in dejection. Even their looks had deteriorated a lot, but their eyes were as resolute as before. Even if they were born for an instant, they would die with a flash. With this spark, they illuminated a smear of darkness. Unknowingly, the giant god of thunder also stopped roaring and only slaughtered numbly. Life and death cycled between heaven and earth, thunder and fire repeated. It was obviously extremely noisy, but there was a strange silence, as if it was a solemn sacrifice to the heavens, or a solemn funeral. The heaven and earth faded because of it. Li Qingshan used himself as a sacrifice, offering his flesh, blood, and soul to the heavens, and the giant god of thunder was the main sacrifice. The thunder god of the ninth heaven sealed himself in a coffin, and was gradually surrounded by the deep silence of the earth, while the tiny Li Qingshan were the mourners. The gods and demons were all silent. Even demon god Qiongqi, who was watching the battle, widened his eyes as if he was in a daze. Suddenly, his heart wavered a little. If even the prologue is so shocking, do I really want to see the miraculous scene of the great tribulation of heaven and earth? The thunder god of the ninth heaven suddenly felt a little tired. The great Tao heavenly dragon that he had guided into his body was getting harder and harder to control. A feeling that he had not felt for a long time spread in his heart. He realized that it was the approach of death. A long, long time ago he had endured this feeling day and night, but after becoming a true immortal and a true god, he had never felt such a threat again. Looking down at the millions of Li Qingshan, he suddenly asked, "Crazy and foolish. Do you know what you've done means? The millions of Li Qingshan raised their heads and answered indifferently. Chaos, war, death, destruction. In short, all misfortune will happen. No one will benefit from this, not even you. No one will benefit from this, not even me. But you still want to do it. But I still want to do it. The Demon King was born not to bring happiness to the people of the world. The thunder god of the ninth heaven smiled bitterly. Looks like this is more meaningful to you. Meaningful? The millions of Li Qingshan looked up at the sky. With a boom, the great Tao heavenly dragon broke out of his body and returned to the sky. The tribulation clouds dispersed, and the bright moon broke. The 7 heavenly tribulations ended here. The green spread quickly, covering the sea of fire and climbing up the body of the giant god of lightning. He did not move at all, like a statue. He sighed. A long, long time ago, I was also a mortal. Above the 9 heavens, a star suddenly fell from the sky. Everyone in the universe could see its flaming tail trailing behind it. At the same time, a red star rose slowly. Chapter 1620. In the 3,000 worlds and the 6 paths of reincarnation, all the cultivators looked at the red star that suddenly appeared and instinctively felt a wave of fear. This ominous sign was too strong. Even those who did not know divination at all could vaguely sense it. The demon star had appeared, the gods had fallen, and the calamity had arrived. In the vast demonic land, the mountain-like body of the thunder god general of the 9 heavens was completely covered in green. From afar, he looked like a stone statue that had experienced the vicissitudes of life and was covered in moss. Under the faint moonlight, a small flower quietly bloomed in the green, exhaling a wisp of fragrance. In an instant, thousands of beautiful flowers bloomed, withered, and bore fruit. Thousands of Li Qingshans emerged from the fruit and raised their heads together, gazing at the star that belonged to them. Once upon a time, the young man who wanted to become a star had finally fulfilled his wish. Thousands of indescribable emotions surged in his chest. Had all his hard work paid off? Had all his hard work been paid off? This was probably not an inspirational story. If he told this story to the cowherd back then, he might not have walked this path at all. Perhaps he would not take this path at all, and would rather be a local tyrant in the 9 regions. Perhaps he would have hesitated and struggled less, and become more resolute. Li Qingshan smiled. Since he had chosen his path, he had shouldered his fate. Why should he care about the pros and cons? At this moment, a large black shadow descended and covered the moon in the sky. Demon god Qiongqi transformed into his original form, a ferocious demonic beast that looked like a tiger with wings. His eyes shone with red light as he stared at Li Qingshan maliciously. I have to say, your performance surprised me. You can even say that I am shocked. I am even a little doubtful if I should have let this calamity come. Don't forget our bet. Now is your weakest moment. I will not be merciful. Demon god Qiongqi licked his fangs. If I kill you, will I become a great hero who saves the universe? Of course, I haven't forgotten. As a result, Li Qingshan shook his head with a smile. I've just sent off a true god, and another one jumps out immediately. This path sure is dangerous. I can't relax even after becoming a god. Demon god Qiongqi was not lying. This was indeed his weakest moment. Although he had successfully passed the 7th heavenly tribulation, he was also heavily injured. Under the attack of the great Tao heavenly dragon, he was on his last breath and needed a long time to recuperate. Without cultivation, there would be no power. But having cultivation without power was not enough. Now all of the wills, all of the seeds, had already blossomed and borne fruit. If they were all destroyed, they would also die. Qiongqi, if you dare to do this, I will not rest until you die. The Taotai demon god's furious roar shook up space, ringing out from the distant Taotai demon world. He was still determined to fight with Li Qingshan. Following that, the voices of a few fiend celestials sounded. They either persuaded him gently or threatened him sternly in an attempt to dissuade fiend celestial Qiongqi. Li Qingshan's performance seemed to have gained some recognition. Or perhaps the demon gods were tired of the endless depravity in the infernal domain and could not wait to change everything, even if they died because of it. Is this the charm of the demon god king? Look boy, they can't wait to be your lackey. But I don't like being a dog like them. Demon god Qiongqi didn't care at all. He didn't listen to the advice, nor was he threatened. He closed in on Li Qingshan step by step, his murderous aura growing thicker. His cold, killing intent locked onto everyone present. His twisted and curious personality always wanted to mess up everything and see what would happen. The 12 demon gods split up the infernal domain and controlled different laws. They did not have the ability to threaten each other's existence. This was also the prerequisite for them to sit down and discuss important matters. In other words, no one could come to Li Qingshan's rescue immediately. He was still fighting alone, and an exhausted one at that. I'm very gratified that they are still warriors. They still yearn for battle and have not completely depraved. You, on the other hand, will be a good dog. Li Qingshan casually let out a taunt. Die! Demon god Qiongqi lunged over, his wings instantly covering the sky. His killing intent locked onto Li Qingshan as thousands of sharp tentacles shot out from his body. Li Qingshan took out a token and raised it high, pointing it at the sky. It was the mountain relocation token. Instantly, the winds stirred and the clouds surged. The mountain-moving sage's phantom appeared in the clouds as he roared angrily like a lion. He instantly stunned demon god Qiongqi, causing him to freeze in midair. Not only did it contain the mountain-moving sage's divine might, but it also contained the wrath of the infernal domain's will. In other words, it was Li Qingshan's wrath. It completely suppressed demon god Qiongqi on the nomological level. Of course, that was not enough. He still needed actual strength. The mountain relocation token in Li Qingshan's hand suddenly descended as he pointed it at Mount Qingqi and gave the order. Mountain come. Mount Qingqi collapsed, smashing heavily onto demon god Qiongqi's body. The ground quaked as dust billowed into the sky. It was accompanied by a series of thunderclaps. Listening carefully, it was the sound of bones shattering. Mount Qingqi was naturally not an ordinary mountain. It had been raised by demon god Qiongqi's lair with his divine powers. In order to support the weight of the mountain, it was constantly refined. The cracks were filled with molten metal, making it look like a metal mountain. The mountain was abnormally majestic. Its height was much higher than the 3 mountains that the mountain-moving sage had given him. Naturally, its weight was much greater as well. It was at least 100 times heavier. With that, demon god Qiongqi's entire body was crushed into a pile of mush. Most of his bones were shattered and his organs were in a mess. They sank deep into the ground as all his divine powers were suppressed. As the saying goes, you shoot yourself in the foot, said Li Qingshan with a smile. Since I refined the mountain myself, I naturally have to carry it on my back. Even though he had the mountain relocation token, he could at most topple Mount Qingqi. There was no way he could control it so casually and use it to suppress a local tyrant like Qiongqi. But after he swallowed the Black Sun demon heart and transcended 7 heavenly tribulations, reaching the realm of refining his soul to return to the void, he had become the true ruler of the fiend domain. He was a powerful dragon that ruled over everything and suppressed everything. He had the highest authority over all the mountains and plants in the fiend domain. Even the demon god's cave abode had to be under his control. With laws, he did not have to worry about lacking power. Qiongqi, I have toppled Mount Qingqi. You have lost. In the void, a blood-colored river Styx flowed as the final guarantee of the bet. Demon god Qiongqi's angry roar came from the foot of the mountain. No, I have not lost. How can a mere river restrain me? Li Qingshan frowned. The river Styx flowing in the void suddenly stopped and gradually faded, as though it had never existed. The Styx river blood oath was removed. Li Qingshan immediately realized that Qiongqi must have played some trick when they made the oath back then, allowing him to escape the punishment of failure. Just like what Oxhead Ah Pang had taught Lutian, if the strength was completely unequal, the bet would be meaningless. The strong would always have a way to break the promise, and the chaotic and evil demon god had no integrity to begin with. If he held the thought that he would win by toppling Mount Qingqi, he would definitely be slapped in the face in the end. But at that time, he was not strong enough and had no other way. But now, it was completely different. A mere river Styx could not guarantee a god's loyalty, so it did not matter if the blood oath was removed. Demon god Qiongqi roared, still unwilling to submit. His ferocious aura filled the world. He struggled violently, causing the mountain to shake and almost overturn. He stretched his head out and stared at Li Qingshan. Huge rocks rolled down on his head. Compared to his huge head, they were as small as gravel. When I break free, it will be your death. I want to see what else you can do. As he spoke, he stretched out another arm and pressed it against the ground, supporting the entire Mount Qingqi. After all, this Mount Qingqi had merged with his divine power. Even though he had turned from guest to host, he still retained some control. Li Qingshan smiled and took out another golden item. It was the great bright mantra with the words, Weng Mani Ni Mi Hum, that he had peeled off from the gate of the great Thunderclap Temple. He rose into the air and came before Mount Qingqi. With a loud bang, he slammed it against the cliff. Boom! Mount Qingqi, which had been supported with great difficulty, seemed to have become many times heavier and crashed heavily back onto the ground. Demon god Qiongqi's eyes bulged. He cried out and spat out a mouthful of blood, which flowed into a blood river. He was on the verge of death and no longer had the slightest strength to resist. The divine power in his body was completely suppressed. That 6 words great bright incantation's note had infinite power. Even his mind was terrified by it and he could not even think of resisting. What is this? Demon god Qiongqi desperately turned his head and tried to look up the mountain. Chapter 1621. A genius in a second remember to go away? We provide you with exciting novels to read. Li Qingshan had once tried to suppress the Garan deity with this post, but it was to no avail. The Garan deity was a guardian deity of Buddhism and was not affected at all. Of course, it was also because his cultivation level was not high enough at that time and he could not unleash the power of the post. Now that he had refined his spirit to return to the void and become an immortal, he immediately understood its magical effects. The 6 words Great Brightness mantra contained great wisdom, great compassion, and great power. It contained the essence of 84,000 Buddhist techniques and contained the laws of Great Tao. Even if a mortal recited it, it would have many magical effects. It could increase one's wisdom, eliminate disasters, escape from life and death, and so on. No matter which Buddhist sect or sect it was recited, it had to be recited. Moreover, it was written by Buddha himself, so it had a natural restraining effect on demon gods. Now, demon god Qiongqi was being suppressed by 3 layers of suppression. The first layer was the demonic will and laws of the demonic domain that Li Qingshan, the king of demon gods and the lord of the demon domain, controlled. The second layer was the laws of Great Tao represented by the Great Tao represented by the Great Sage Moving Mountain. The third layer was the seal written by Buddha himself. Each layer of suppression was more powerful than the previous. It was much more effective than the Nether River Blood Oath. Even a demon god could not escape from it. If not for the 6 words Great Brightness mantra containing a sense of compassion and no killing intent, it could even crush Qiongqi to death. Buddha himself. Demon god Qiongqi's heart skipped a beat. He lowered his head and immediately lost his temper. It was no wonder that the post had such power. Even a demon god like him was deeply shocked and could not move. He asked in shock, "Where did you get it from? Could it be that you're a Buddhist?" Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He could sense that the other demon gods had all tensed up as well, waiting for his answer quietly. He could not help but snicker and answer calmly, "I obviously ripped it off from the gate of the Great Lain Monastery. I demolished the Great Lain Monastery along the way and toppled Spirit Vulture Mountain." Although he had not intended to do all of this, there was not the slightest bit of falsehood in his words. Demon god Qiongqi was instantly speechless as he stared at Li Qingshan with widened eyes. All his life, he had always been fond of punishing the good and praising the evil, inverting right and wrong. At this moment, he suddenly felt that all the evil he had done in his life added up could not compare to Li Qingshan's light words. The Spirit Vulture Mountain and the Great Thunderclap Monastery were sacred and inviolable places. Suddenly, he recalled that not long ago, there was a great shock in the Elysium. It turned out that it was his doing. The Pure Land and the Demonic Land were both formed from the Qilin Paradise. They were actually two sides of the same coin. If one side had a huge change, the other side would immediately have a reaction. Actually, the Spirit Vulture Mountain and the Great Thunderclap Monastery were secondary. The key was still the Lotus Pond, which was the foundation of the Elysium. Its effects were almost equivalent to the Black Sun Devil Heart. Now that Li Qingshan had swallowed both of them and fused them into one, it was equivalent to controlling the Qilin Paradise. It would also inevitably cause the two worlds to start fusing. For the Buddhist sects, it was equivalent to destroying the Western Paradise and becoming enemies with the gods and Buddhas of the heavens. A war was inevitable. His opponents were the gods, the four bodhisattvas, and even Gautama Buddha. Li Qingshan took a deep look at the golden post on the mountain rock. Jokes aside, compared to demon god Qiongqi in front of him, Gautama Buddha, who had written the post, made him feel more apprehensive. How can such an unbelievable existence be defeated? The fear of a huge golden hand suddenly descending from the heavens and smacking him to death did not lessen after he became a true god. Instead, it intensified. Upon hearing these words, not only demon god Qiongqi, but the other demon gods were also deeply shocked. Originally, Tao Tai, Tao Wu, Chang Liang, and a few other pro-war factions were already inclined to support Li Qingshan's ascension to the throne and start a real war. Now, they were even more ferocious. Since he could even topple the Spirit Vulture Mountain and demolish the Great Thunderclap Monastery, nothing was impossible. The other demon gods also dispelled their disloyalty. They thought to themselves, this person was born in response to the calamity. He is a natural malefic star that can crush everything. He is extremely ferocious. If we continue to fight him head-on, we will probably die in his hands. Demon god Qiongqi asked, how did you walk out of the pure land of ultimate bliss? Li Qingshan shrugged and pointed upwards. I have people above me. He turned around and cupped his hands towards the sky. The phantom lion in the clouds nodded at him before dispersing. 7 great sages, mountain-shifting token. Demon god Qiongqi muttered. I should have known. If you knew this would happen, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. Hee, the more I know I shouldn't have done it, the more I want to try. At this moment, a cool night breeze blew from afar, ruffling the thousands of flowers and leaves, causing them to sway together. Li Qingshan took a deep breath. It was the trade wind that great sage of ventilation had given him. It contained all the insights he had gained in the colorless realm. It was about the mysterious realm of no thoughts, and no thoughts. In the past, he did not have enough power and could not support such a realm. Now, he could finally do it. Whoosh, whoosh, the sound of the wind became louder and louder, reverberating between heaven and earth. This world was his small world. After going through 7 heavenly tribulations, his current realm was refining the spirit to return to the void. The void was not the void, nor was it the void. Instead, it was the invisible, untouchable, omnipresent, omnipotent great Tao laws. At this moment, he could finally be considered as the true ruler of the demonic realm. He could control this world at will. With a thought, spiritual power gathered. Immediately, a vine rose up from the ground with a rumble, wriggling and extending like a dragon or snake. It sucked in all of the tiny Li Qingshan, wrapping around Qingqi Mountain and blooming with white flowers. Finally, it formed a purple-gold gourd. With a crack, the gourd split open. Rays of light shone and thousands of auspicious colors shone. Li Qingshan leaped out like a mountain. His eyes shone with divine light and he was indestructible. He controlled water and fire and hid himself. He stepped on Qiongqi's head and scolded, "You old dog, how dare you deceive me? Do you still remember how arrogant you were back then?" For so many years, he had been under so much pressure for this bet. Qiongqi still dared to play tricks and escape the restrictions of the Nether River Blood Oath, almost causing him to fail miserably. Without me, you might not be where you are today. Demon God Qiongqi rolled his eyes. In that case, I have to thank you. Li Qingshan narrowed his eyes and murderous intent shot out. Since you like to court death so much, then die. He waved his hand and summoned a sword, slashing it down. Xinyuan sword. Demon God Qiongqi was shocked. How did this kid have everything? If he was beheaded by this sword, his life would be over. He shouted, "Spare my life." The sword stopped in midair. Li Qingshan questioned, "You coward, what's the use of sparing you?" Chapter 1622. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Shua. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. This Qiongqi was really a weirdo. Love go, small say, Netku. However, since he was willing to surrender and didn't harbor any ill intentions, there was no harm in sparing his life. Thus, he sheathed his sword. Since that's the case, I'll leave your head on your neck. If you dare to defy me in the future or play any tricks, I guarantee that you won't be able to see anything. Now that the great tribulation of heaven and earth had arrived and a great battle was imminent, as the king of demon gods, the 12 demon gods under him were of utmost importance. Although it was okay to kill 1 or 2 and the evil gods below could replenish, who knew how much time would be wasted and how many evil gods would die? He had just experienced the power of the 7th heavenly tribulation, and the deities of the thunder department of the heavenly palace would never let go of any evil god that tried to become a devil god. Even if he was lucky enough to transcend the tribulation, his foundation would definitely not be as deep as the original Fian Celestials. Paths, laws, temperament, these things were all linked together. It was not something that could be done by randomly finding an evil god. A weirdo like Qiongqi was probably not easy to find even in the demon domain. Qiongqi, a true god, could actually still laugh when his head was being stepped on. Hee hee, I can't wait anymore. You can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. You better reflect on yourself down there. Li Qingshan lifted his foot and was about to leave. Qiongqi hurriedly said, "Wait, how long will it take?" 500 years. Qiongqi rolled his eyes. He had finally seen how vengeful the demon god king was. Li Qingshan took a step forward and disappeared, reappearing in the sky above the blood maze. He looked down at the rotten flesh piled up on the ground and recalled everything that had happened in the past day. It still felt like a dream. However, this place was the center of the entire infernal domain. In order to prepare for war, he had to summon the 12 demonic gods to discuss important matters, but now was not the time. In the world of cultivation, the strong were respected. This was even more so in the demonic domain. Not all of the 12 demonic gods were willing to serve him as their king. Even the few pro-war factions actually supported the war, not Li Qingshan. Therefore, the most important thing to do now was to strengthen oneself. Only by grasping the power that belonged to a true god would one have the capital to be a king. But for now, there was no harm in testing the waters. Li Qingshan sent a telepathic message to the 12 demon gods and gave the first order, switch. The infernal domain was divided into 12 demonic realms by the 12 demonic gods. They were only connected to each other by mountain passes. To enter and exit, one needed to have a customs document. It was in a semi-sealed state. This was equivalent to 12 vassal kingdoms. The demon gods were the vassal kings, and all the demon folk in the kingdoms only revered them. They possessed all the authority in the demon world. Moreover, they were not friendly neighbors, but full of disputes and disagreements. If it wasn't for the immense pressure from the desireless heavenly palace and the fact that they could invade other worlds at the same time, they would have long been in a state of chaos. The Black Sun Devil Heart was equivalent to the Imperial Jade Seal. Since Li Qingshan wanted to be the emperor, he had to break the situation and make it so that all lands under the heavens belong to the emperor, and all those who live by the emperor's side are his subjects. If we wish to wage war, we must unite as one. Does anyone have any objections? Yes, my king. In the Jinyun restaurant, the Taotai demon god tidied his clothes and bowed towards Li Qingshan from afar, immediately opening up the territory. Yes, my king. Below Mount Qingqi, demon god Qiongqi was still lying at the foot of the mountain. He obviously had no objections either, obeying the order obediently. At the same time, he licked his lips and widened his eyes. Something very interesting was about to happen. Not all demon gods would be so obedient. And how are you going to respond? My king. Immediately, the Taotai demon world and the Qiongqi demon world immediately connected with the land beneath Li Qingshan's feet. Demon qi surged and demonic clouds surged, clashing and merging, forming a great swirl in the sky. Li Qingshan stood in the center of the swirl and began his rule over the two demon worlds. From then onwards, the demon folk no longer needed to apply for customs documents. They could move about freely, and they were no longer just subjects of the Taotai and Qiongqi demon worlds. He had not just gained land and demon folk, but also authority, faith, and laws. The demons were filled with joy. His heart was filled with joy as well. The two resonated with one another, and his grasp over the laws of the demon domain deepened. However, this was only the beginning. He was still waiting for the other demon gods to respond. Yes, my king. Not long after, a few fiend celestials from the pro-war faction also opened up their territories. Li Qingshan had already proven his strength and determination to them. They were not stupid. They understood what war was. This time, it was different from invading other worlds. Their enemies this time were the gods and Buddhas. They had to unite the entire demon domain, and Li Qingshan was the only candidate. All of his orders were military orders. Unless Li Qingshan made a serious mistake with his military orders, or he no longer supported war, they would all obey him. As the demon gods chose to submit, the swirl of demonic clouds immediately expanded by several times. The world resonated, and the ground rumbled. Mountains rose up from the ground, breaking through the rotting ruins left behind by the blood maze. The mountains were like the sea. The winding mountain ranges danced like demonic dragons, leaping out of the hidden abyss. Li Qingshan was the king of the demon gods, the leader of the dragons. The world had changed, and the world had changed. It was like the saying, crouching tiger and coiling dragon, the present surpasses the past, and the world is overturned. Li Qingshan was filled with lofty sentiments. Originally, he only wanted to test the demon gods, but he changed his mind now. There was no need for him to be overcautious anymore. He drew his sword from its sheath and pointed it at the sky. I command the world. Who dares to disobey? The remaining demon gods who had yet to submit felt a tremendous pressure descend on their heads at the same time. They could not help but become furious. This kid has only undergone the 7th heavenly tribulation. In terms of age, he's not even a fraction of us, yet he's actually trying to oppress us like this. They were not as shameless as Qiongqi, who could not even get angry after being stepped on. They were lofty gods, worshipped by billions of demon folk for who knew how many tens of thousands of years. How could they not have some pride? In their eyes, Li Qingshan had used the demon heart of Black Sun to rise rapidly. Whether it was defeating the thunder god of the 9 heavens or demon god Qiongqi, there was an element of trickery involved. He did not rely on his own strength, so he obviously could not convince them completely. Although none of them were bold enough to stand up against Li Qingshan, they still had the confidence to feign obedience. Is this kid really bold enough to fall out with the 7 demon gods at the same time? Moreover, they were not too willing to declare war against the gods and Buddhas. The risk of dying was far too great. It would be best if they could drag things out for a little longer. Once the Chaos Demon Star emerged, it would definitely suffer heavy blows from the gods and Buddhas. Once Li Qingshan died, they could still continue being their demon gods. They would not lose their dignity as gods, and they would also reduce the risk. It would be the best of both worlds. However, Li Qingshan did not give them the opportunity to drag things out at all. Even though he pursed his lips and said nothing, he had already expressed his thoughts clearly. If anyone dares to not give me an explanation today, I will definitely give them an explanation in the future. Those who submit to me live, and those who oppose me die. It's up to you. Chapter 1623. The Tsang Mountains were like the sea. thousands of mountains rose and fell, and groups of dragons raised their heads. Li Qingshan stood in the sky, his emotions fluctuating with the Tsang Mountains and the sea of clouds. Above his head, a bewildering star swayed amidst the changing winds and clouds. Demon stars appeared, true gods fell, and Xiongqi fell. Before anyone could fully digest all of this, he started a new round of war, commanding the demons to bow their heads. "I'm not here to call for peace, but for war." He needed the power of the 12 demon gods, but if they were unwilling to submit, he did not mind carrying out a great purge first. Even if all the demon gods fell and the demonic domain turned into ruins. It could be considered a good deed. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. The black patterns on his face twisted and changed, and a pair of red eyes flashed with brutality. He did not hide it at all, and continued to use this will to dance wildly like a storm. The demon gods wavered. This will was real. He really did not hesitate to destroy the entire demonic domain, determined to kill all those who disobeyed him. Originally, their greatest reliance was that Li Qingshan did not dare to easily attack them, and needed to use diplomatic means to gain their support. They were all ancient demon gods with deep roots, while Li Qingshan was only a new demon god born in response to the tribulation. He had just passed the 7th heavenly tribulation, and did not have the ability to crush them. To put it bluntly, Li Qingshan's status was similar to the military leaders elected by the tribal alliance. Even major decisions had to be discussed with the elders, and he only had greater decision-making power during wartime. It was a very ancient military democracy. However, Li Qingshan was clearly not satisfied with this. He wanted to be a dictator, or rather, he wanted to enter a state of war directly and have supreme power. The confrontation continued. Li Qingshan's brutality grew stronger and stronger, and his patience was running out. When the Shenyuan sword in his hand swung down, it was the signal for war to begin. There would be no enlistment, no surrender, until one side was completely destroyed and fell. "Yes, Your Majesty." Suddenly, a faint sigh came from the distant north. Another demon god had opened up a territory. Alas, if this is my fate, then how can I escape it? Although he did not support starting a war with the gods and Buddhas of the highest heaven, once the demonic zone started to fight, the heavenly palace would definitely not sit idly by. In order to deal with this great tribulation of heaven and earth, perhaps even a divine king like Emperor Zhenwu, who had gone through 8 heavenly tribulations and was at the void refinement and path reunion stage, would directly take action. In the end, even if he defeated Li Qingshan, he still couldn't withstand the thunderous strike of the 9 heavens Buddha. Also, he did not think that the peacemakers could defeat the warmongers, led by Li Qingshan at all. They might be stronger, but compared to the ferocious beasts that were full of killing intent and fangs, they could only be regarded as large herbivores. Therefore, he persuaded the other demon gods instead. Fellow Taoists, at times like this, we must consider the bigger picture. The balance had completely tilted, and there was no longer any suspense about what would happen next. In an instant, all the demon gods submitted to Li Qingshan, offering up the demonic lands that they ruled, and said, "We obey your orders." Except for the chaos demon god, who had already sunk into eternal chaos and completely lost his will. The whirlpool in the sky spun wildly, and layers of laws and surging demonic power gathered towards Li Qingshan. The mountains below rose and fell, and the entire land was lifted up, forming a plateau. It was like a crouching giant beast that was awakening from the depths of the land. The demon heart of the black sun radiated brilliantly. At this point, Li Qingshan had almost taken over the entire demonic domain without any bloodshed. Whether it was power or authority, he was above every demon god. Demon god Xiongqi's praises sounded in his ears. "Congratulations, Your Majesty! Congratulations, Your Majesty! You are now the true king of the demon gods. You have sharp instincts and a firm will, which will help you win in the future battles. Oh yes, I am no longer a threat to you. I will not do something without any suspense, so..." Naturally, Li Qingshan understood what he meant. He smiled faintly. "Very well, then please help me again." He waved the Shenyuan sword and pointed it at the chaos demon world. "Of course." Demon god Qiongqi immediately gave his full support and opened up all the laws he controlled to Li Qingshan. These were the core laws he controlled. Even Li Qingshan, the master of the demonic domain, could not take them away. He could only borrow them. The demon god's submission was not just a formality. This was the most important point. From now on, Li Qingshan could use the core laws they controlled at any time. At the same time, he could understand these core laws and strengthen the demon heart of the Black Sun, further controlling the entire demonic domain. At the same time, he could grasp the weakness of every demon god and obtain even more powerful ruling power. If the demon gods opened up the demonic domain, it was equivalent to offering land to their subjects. Then at this moment, it was the emperor lighting the beacon, gathering the vassals, and dispatching the 6 armies to suppress the disobedient subjects. Waving my sword, the vassals come to the west. At this point, the demon gods had no other choice but to consider the big picture. They all opened up their authority to Li Qingshan and offered up their core laws. Li Qingshan seemed to see a grand painting slowly unfurl before him. It contained the entire essence of the demonic domain. It was the gateway to the 8th heavenly tribulation and the unification of void and Tao. However, there was a patch of darkness in the painting, a patch of chaos. The demon god of chaos, the most powerful of the 12 demon gods, possessed even more power than the 11 demon gods combined. He controlled the most powerful laws of the demonic domain, the laws of chaos. He had once been infinitely close to the Black Sun in the sky, close to the essence of the laws of the demonic domain. He had the chance to become the master of the demonic domain through his own strength. However, it was exactly because of this that his consciousness was constantly corroded and assimilated by the laws of chaos, until he completely descended into chaos. He became powerful because of chaos, and he became chaotic because of strength. This was his destiny. Over the course of several 100,000 years, his followers constantly dispersed. They either killed one another in internal strife, or he slaughtered them all in the chaos. Only an extremely small number of demon folk retained their faith in him. The other demon gods also took advantage of this opportunity to devour the chaos demon world. Although it was ruled by the most powerful demon god, it was the smallest of the 12 demon worlds instead. However, this final piece of the map was crucial. It had to do with whether the demonic domain could be completely unified or not, and it had to do with the completeness of the painting. Li Qingshan was completely focused. As the master of the demonic domain, he used the power of the 11 demon worlds and 11 demon gods to forcefully break through all the barriers and devour the chaos demon world in a single gulp. He obtained the final piece of the puzzle. The 12 demon worlds were all connected. Li Qingshan widened his eyes. Just how grand of a painting was this? On one side was the demon domain, while on the other was the pure land of bliss. On one side was pain and evil, while on the other side was joy and kindness. At the same time, they permeated each other and served as the background. It was extremely exquisite and unbelievable. If all of this was created by the primordial Qilin, then just how powerful was the primordial Qilin? Whether it was in terms of power or laws, it was probably far beyond what the current gods could compare to. In that case, just how powerful was the Buddha that split the entire Qilin paradise into 2? He was so entranced by his gaze that he did not even notice that right below him, a lone mountain rose up from the plateau in the mountains, reaching into the clouds. In the blink of an eye, it had become the highest peak in the demon domain, and it was still constantly rising up. A hysterical howl rang out from the abyss of the Valley of Tang. A monster that resembled a tumor writhed madly. Li Qingshan's head suddenly blurred, and he plummeted down from the sky, landing on the highest peak. His mind was in a complete mess. At one moment he wanted to dance, but at the same time he wanted to burst into tears. It was a demon god. Even though he had lost his consciousness, he still resisted the devouring instinctively. The howl surpassed the range of hearing, and it ignored the barrier of distance. It was not just the tremors of sound waves, but the ripples of laws, directly shaking up the soul. Even human immortals and evil gods would immediately descend into madness, their consciousness completely collapsing. Even true gods would suffer from chi deviation when they heard it. Spirit turtle transformation. A spirit turtle appeared behind Li Qingshan, immediately suppressing his frenzied mind. His eyes were as deep as the sea as he rapidly wove laws and set down layers of defenses, stopping the chaotic howls. He immediately felt his mind clear up. However, the demon god had already found his location. Its tumor-like body constantly swelled up and rolled, crawling out of the abyss of the Valley of Tang. Li Qingshan was standing on the highest peak of the demon domain, the place closest to paradise. The abyss of the Valley of Tang where the demon god resided was the lowest valley in the demon domain. It was filled with foul miasma that had accumulated for millions of years. It constantly surged and rose. Once it spread out, probably most of the demon domain would be reduced to a land of death. At least half of the demon folk would be wiped out. At the same time, the laws of chaos rapidly twisted and tore apart the defenses he had set down. Once his position had been locked onto, the demon god would appear before him in the next moment. That would be a huge joke. The demon god was no longer a true god in the regular sense of the word. Instead, it had become an existence similar to the space-devouring beasts. It had become a natural phenomenon, the darkest and most twisted side of the demon domain. Li Qingshan knew that if he fought against the demon god right now, the situation would be no different from a civil war. It might even be even more difficult. If the demon gods suddenly withdrew all of their laws when the battle reached its most intense, leaving him to face the demon god alone, he might even be in danger of dying. The demon gods said nothing. They all wanted to see how he would deal with the demon god. If you want our power, then we'll give it to you. If you can't achieve victory, then you deserve to die. He would be dragged into the abyss of the Valley of Tang by the demon god, unable to break free for the rest of his life. However, Li Qingshan was still very experienced in dealing with things that had no self-awareness. In that moment, he completely concealed his existence. He did not just hide his presence or deceive their senses. Instead, he severed all karma with the demon god. Of course, it was impossible for him to sever it completely. With his power, he could only sever it for a split second. A split second later, the demon god had already forgotten who Li Qingshan was. He had also forgotten all of his fury and hatred. He slowly descended back into the abyss of the Valley of Tang. The demon gods were all convinced. Demon god Qiongqi sighed in amazement. "My king, you actually still possess intelligence. Do you want to be suppressed for 10,000 years? Chapter 1624. The void-swallowing beast named Deep Blue Little Fatty roamed in the deep, dark void, devouring stars and worlds one after another. Its size far exceeded that of an ordinary creature, and the so-called prehistoric beasts were as tiny as ants beside it. When it appeared in the sky above a world, its translucent blue body would cover the entire sky. All creatures could see it without looking up, but no one could see its full appearance. In terms of the level of energy it contained, even a true immortal could not compare. This was because the void-devouring beast was not a living creature, but the embryonic form of a world. It followed the laws of nature and roamed the void, feeding on the corpses of other worlds. At the same time, it gave birth to even more void-devouring beasts. When it had accumulated a certain amount of matter, the void-devouring beast would stop and begin to derive earth, fire, wind, and water, finally forming a world. Such a cycle maintained the life and death cycle of the 3,000 worlds. Deep Blue Fatty was only in its mother's body when it was invaded by Li Qingshan, who in turn devoured the mother's body. Even so, it still did not have any self-awareness, only a series of instincts. The Chaos Demon God had become a similar existence, assimilated into a part of the demon realm, and was already it. If one did not understand the situation and rashly fought it as an ordinary demon god, they would be asking for trouble. Not only did it have a terrifying level of energy, but the law of primal chaos also had the ability to distort and destroy other laws. If a true immortal dared to fight it head-on, they would be horrified to find that the laws they controlled were completely ineffective, and they would be dragged down to the same level, where they would be devoured by the terrifying energy. During this process, all techniques would be rendered ineffective, and they would not even be able to escape. And perhaps the demon gods did not understand all of this as well as Li Qingshan. They were usually stuck in the demon realm and did not dare to go out, so they naturally did not have the chance to roam the void, let alone enter the body of a void-devouring beast. Although Li Qingshan was not even a fraction of their age, he had a lot of experience. He had once been the divine general of paradise, and he had even walked through the 6 paths of reincarnation. He could be considered a piece of real estate in the 3,000 worlds, and it was still rising in value. The 5 continents world had become extremely huge, far surpassing the 9 provinces of the past. Therefore, when he used the karma-severing technique, he easily avoided the confrontation and sent the chaos demon god back to the abyss of the Valley of Tang. Even the demon god was in awe. Demon god Qiongqi sang loudly, "My king is strong, my king is prosperous. You are brave and wise, the most perfect combination of heaven and earth, the ultimate creation. When you were born, the entire infernal domain was softly calling your name, Li Qingshan. If heaven had not given birth to Li Qingshan, the ages would have been like a long night. He seeks happiness for the demon folk. He's the great savior of the demon folk." The demon gods were speechless, feeling deeply ashamed. Li Qingshan rolled his eyes. "Shut up. Even a cultivator who had gone through 2 or 3 heavenly tribulations would not be able to utter such words, let alone a god." The most hateful thing was that even when this fellow was fawning, there seemed to be a hint of mockery mixed in it, causing people to feel uncomfortable all over. Demon god Qiongqi turned around and pleaded, "Please show mercy, my king. Please forgive me. I'm old and frail, so I really can't withstand this mountain. After being pressed down for a while, my back hurts so much that it's almost snapped. Cough, 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 I can't take it anymore, I can't take it anymore." As he spoke, there was a series of coughs. His voice had become much older. He did not seem like a rebel who wanted to kill Li Qingshan, but an old official who had served the king for many years in the imperial court and had been treated unfairly. Li Qingshan had basically resigned himself to such a shameless guy. Apart from venting his anger, there was no longer any point in suppressing Qiongqi anymore. With the unification of the entire demon domain and the possession of the core laws of 11 demon gods, his strength and authority had already reached its peak. Qiongqi could no longer threaten him anymore, and with Qiongqi's weird personality, there was no possibility of him rebelling either. Although he could continue to vent his anger on Qiongqi, before he could even raise his hand, Qiongqi had already offered his face to him, saying, "Please slap my face hard," as if saying, "If you don't let me go, I'll keep fawning and begging you." The so-called shame and honor of the world had no meaning to him at all. Instead, he found it very interesting and enjoyed it very much. He was not the kind of guy who used his strength to toy with the weak, but a hunter of novelty who practiced what he preached. Li Qingshan shook his head and waved his hand from afar. On the distant Qingqi mountain, the 6-word Great Brightness mantra written by the Buddha was lifted up by a gust of wind and gently floated down. With a boom, the mountain rocks shattered, and the earth shook. Qiongqi immediately burrowed out from the bottom of the mountain and bowed deeply in Li Qingshan's direction. "Thank you, my king, for your mercy. Long live my king." Li Qingshan could not be bothered to distinguish whether living to 10,000 years was a blessing or a curse to him. With the unification of the demon domain, a huge change was happening in the demon domain. Rumble, 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 the earth shook, and the mountains rose and fell. A plateau rose from the earth, its height already higher than most of the mountain peaks in the demon domain, like a tiger crouching down. The mountains on the plateau were like the sea, and dragons and snakes rose from the land, surrounding a mountain peak in the middle. The mountain peak pierced through the clouds and was still rising, breaking through the layers of clouds as if it was going to poke a big hole in the sky. Li Qingshan stood on the peak of the mountain, and unknowingly, he was already above the sea of clouds. As the vortex of the demonic clouds under his feet gradually dissipated, he looked into the distance and saw billowing smoke and thousands of mountains surging towards him. It was as if the entire demon domain was under his feet. In fact, it was indeed so. What a crouching tiger and coiling dragon. Unfortunately, no matter how high the mountain was, it could not be higher than the sky. The structure of the demon domain and the Pure Land was very complicated and indescribable. It was not as simple as the demon domain being below and the Pure Land being above. It could not even be simply described as up and down. The metaphor of a painting being divided into two sides was just a metaphor. The demon domain and the Pure Land were essentially a single entity, and the reason they were separated from each other was because they were connected. Only like that could the evil thoughts of the Pure Land constantly sink into the demon domain, absorbing the exuberant life force at the same time. Only then could the unbelievably fertile land be created. But it was exactly because of this that the demonic beasts in the Pure Land of Bliss would run amok. They would pass through the passageway and invade the Pure Land of Bliss at midnight every day. What Li Qingshan wanted to do was expand the passageway between the two worlds, completely shattering this gap and merging the two worlds into one again. There would no longer be a demon domain of bliss. This was not resentment, nor was it revenge. Instead, it was following the way of nature and restoring the original Qilin paradise. On that day, there would still be a struggle for survival of the fittest, and there would still be the cruelty of survival of the fittest, but there would no longer be demon folk who were born sinful. Everyone would be able to choose their own fate again. The unification of the demon domain was only a beginning. The merging of the two worlds had already begun. At that moment, all of the demon folk raised their heads and discovered that a faint golden rim had appeared on the black sun above their heads. Li Qingshan could not help but extend his hand as if he wanted to grasp it. Chapter 1625. Path of the Hungry Ghost. A white hand reached toward the night sky, and a red star floated in the clouds, mesmerizing and illusory. The star was far and unreachable. Finally, he could only put his hand back to his chest, which had already turned into white bones. He sighed softly, "Qing'an." As he chased after the sun, there were also people chasing after the starlight behind him. Li Qingshan sensed something and suddenly turned back, only to hear the mountain wind whistling, blowing from the distant horizon to the end of the world. It was cold at the top, and there was no one around when he reached the peak. No, there was someone else, although it was someone he did not want to see. Qian Rongji bowed slightly and asked respectfully, "What's wrong, my king?" "Nothing." Li Qingshan shook his head. Conquering the 12 demon realms, unifying all the demonic lands, and declaring the great ambition of letting the sun shine on the demonic lands was only the first step of his long journey. Now, he had too many things to handle. It could be said that he had 1,000 things to do. First, he had to start seclusion to comprehend the great Tao. There were two parts to this. One was the series of laws that he had comprehended through the refining the spirit to return to the void. A large part of it was born from his own path, mainly the 9 transformations of demons and gods, and the unfettered tome. It had little to do with the laws of the demon domain. Especially since the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine still had many transformations that had not been perfected, he had to take this opportunity to push it to a higher realm. Next was to use the Black Sun Demon Heart as a foundation and combine it with the core laws obtained from the 11 demon gods to further comprehend the laws of the demonic realm. At the same time, he had to comprehend the laws of the Pure Land of ultimate bliss and trace back to the most primitive memories of the Qilin paradise. During this process, he had to use the plateau and mountains as a foundation to absorb a massive amount of spiritual power to maintain the consumption of energy. At the same time, he had to constantly convert it into his own power to truly possess the power of a true god. Laws and power were everything to a god. They were the foundation that allowed him to rule over the demonic realm. Next was the strategy of the demonic realm for the next 100 years. He gave a series of orders. The first order was, stop invading other worlds, including the human realm. He had to switch to a strategic defense and prepare to deal with external attacks. At the same time, he had to focus on solving the internal problems of the demonic realm. The Fiend Celestials expressed their support for this. With the appearance of the Chaos Demon Star, the Great Tribulation of heaven and earth began, and the Demon God King was born. Then the infernal domain would have to suffer the fiercest attack. The immortals and Buddhas of the nine heavens would not just sit here and wait for them to grow stronger. The desire-less heavenly palace had probably mobilized all of its forces. It was probably not only the selfless heavenly palace, but all the heavenly palaces and deities above the nine heavens were preparing to face this tribulation. If one were to say that the demonic domain of the past was merely a malignant disease that was difficult to eradicate, a benign tumor that was slowly growing, although it had invaded and annexed many worlds and fought back and forth with the human realm, compared to the entire 3,000 worlds and the 6 paths of reincarnation, it was actually not much of a threat at all. Even if another 10,000 years were to pass, it would not be able to cause any great changes, let alone threaten the nine heavens. Now, following Li Qingshan's entry into the demonic realm, this benign tumor had completely transformed into a malignant tumor. When Li Qingshan directly annexed the most important Buddhist Pure Land as his goal, its nature had completely changed. From a separatist bandits and refugees, it had become a rebel army plotting to usurp the throne. If this was only a threat to the Buddhist faction, Li Qingshan himself had a deep relationship with the 7 great sages. This made all the immortals uneasy. Although the 7 great sages were suppressed, each of them was a supreme existence that had merged with the void. As long as the great path was not destroyed, their existence would not be destroyed. Compared to them, the 12 fiend celestials were as docile as babies. Once they were released, the world would immediately be in chaos, and the gods would not be able to survive. And this was certainly Li Qingshan's next most important goal. Once his power reached its peak, he would immediately begin to rescue the 7 great sages and fulfill the 9 heavens pact with Brother Ox. Because of this, the immortals and Buddhas of the 9 heavens wanted him dead at all costs. Now, if he dared to take a step out of the demonic realm, Zhenwu the Great would immediately send him to the next world. The reason why he could sit here comfortably and think about things was thanks to the demonic realm. Like the ordinary world, the demonic realm also had a tolerance limit. It could only accommodate existences that had undergone 7 divine tribulations and had refined their spirits to return to the void. For existences of a higher level, there would be a very strong rejection. Moreover, the demonic realm itself was large enough, and its will was strong enough to distort and suppress all the rules of outsiders, even destroying and polluting their rules. It could be regarded as a super-powerful version of the Chaos Fiend Celestial. Therefore, although the Fiend Celestials did not dare to leave the demonic realm, they had the basic ability to protect themselves. In particular, the 12 Citadel Demon formation of the evil was extremely powerful. This was different from the so-called formation of ordinary cultivators. Instead, it relied on the boundless net of rules of the demonic realm to form. Once it was activated, it could strangle a real god and further strengthen the restrictions on existences at the level of Zhenwu the Great. Therefore, the internal construction was of utmost importance. Forcing the Fiend Celestials to submit was actually a risky move. With the existence of the 12 Fiend Celestials, there was the 12 Citadel Demon formation of the evil. Although the Chaos Fiend Celestial had completely gone mad, it was still an important foundation of the 12 Citadel Demon formation of the evil. The other Fiend Celestials could use it for defense. If a Fiend Celestial fell, then the entire defense system would collapse. Li Qingshan, the new Fiend Celestial King, would very likely be killed by the decapitation operation. Fortunately, the peace-loving Fiend Celestials were clearly more willing to consider the big picture than him. Although the 11 Fiend Celestials had already submitted, the problem of the Chaos Fiend Celestial had to be solved sooner or later. He had to think of a way to awaken its consciousness and obtain the part of the core rules it controlled. Only then would the 12 Citadel Demon formation of the evil have the ability to attack outside. Therefore, he summoned Qian Rongji. Do you know why I summoned you here? The Chaos Fiend Celestial has fallen, and you want me to replace it. That's right. Are you willing? Generally speaking, no one would be willing. It was not just a matter of risk. Instead, they would inevitably lose a large part of themselves, or even be completely assimilated, turning into a chaotic and twisted monster. They could no longer be called a god. Of course, Qian Rongji did not hesitate and gladly accepted. But I need to make some preparations. You need a long time to prepare. Go, I will support you spiritually. Li Qingshan waved his hand indifferently. He was already the representative of the demon territory's will. His spiritual support meant endless resources and luck. After experiencing all sorts of changes, he no longer hated Qian Rongji. However, Qian Rongji did not retreat. Instead, she took a step forward and stared at Li Qingshan. My king, I still have one more thing. Li Qingshan frowned. A feeling of disgust arose spontaneously. Just by sensing with his mind, he immediately understood Qian Rongji's plan. Qian Rongji wanted to bring the Ming cult to greater heights and spread it across the entire demon territory. She was obviously the cult leader of the Ming cult, and the supreme god that her followers believed in was obviously him, the great savior of demon folk. Afterwards, they would be reduced to statues and statues, enshrined high up in the temple, becoming some sort of twisted symbol. As his followers, they would obviously receive many privileges, while those who did not believe in him would be severely punished. Then should he build a paradise for his devout followers in the future? And give those blasphemers a piece of demonic soil? That was basically the greatest irony. I refuse. You can leave. Qian Rongji pointed at the black sun in the sky. My king, I can sense something. Probably all demon folk can sense it too. Kindness awakens in many people. If no one affirms these kindness, it will continue to be buried in the bottom of their hearts. The few awakened ones will still be hunted down and killed. Who will protect them? If no one guides demon folk, this chaos will continue forever. The kind-hearted demon folk will only suffer even more. They'll feel like they're in hell, burdened with sin and killing one another. Generations of demon folk will suffer pointless pain and sacrifice pointless. Without stable order and a loyal army, light will never come. Qian Rongji spoke confidently. The pressure from Li Qingshan grew heavier and heavier. Even breathing became difficult for her, but she still refused to stop talking. Finally, she knelt on the ground and knocked her forehead against the rock heavily. Blood sprayed and the rock collapsed. Chapter 1626. Li Qingshan remained silent for quite a while. He waved his hand and turned around. The corner of Qian Rongji's lips curled up slightly. Her scarlet eyes were dazzling as she bowed deeply again. I will spread the gospel. My king's benevolence and grace will definitely spread across the demon domain, allowing everyone in the demon domain to know about it. They will be your most loyal and fanatical warriors. Afterwards, she stood up in satisfaction and made her way down the mountain. Li Qingshan raised his head and stared deeply, deeply at the black sun rimmed with gold, overlapping with his pitch-black eyes. Finally, he was the only one left here. Like an ascetic monk, he sat down on the rock at the top of the mountain and sank into his eternal thoughts. In that moment, the wind and clouds changed, and the clouds changed. The vast, endless spiritual chi of the world gathered towards this highland, this lone mountain, and this man. As soon as Qian Rongji made her way down from the highland, she suddenly looked back and saw a visible river of light in the sky. It fluctuated like an aurora, flowing with a myriad of colors. She sighed in admiration from the bottom of her heart. What a magnificent sight! All the demon folk in a range of several tens of thousand kilometers could see it clearly. They were enchanted by this beautiful scenery they had never seen before. The river rose and fell. That was his fluctuating emotions. From time to time, it would kick up a series of vortices. That was his surging thoughts. Is it worth it? As he comprehended the laws of the demon domain, he could clearly see the future. He saw how his statue would break out of the rock, be plastered with gold, and be delivered into a glorious hall. He also saw people prostrating at the feet of the statue devoutly and passionately, filled with pain and hope. Yet, all I can give them is destruction. From the very beginning, he only wanted to walk his own path, so he was unwilling to establish too deep of a connection with others. Hatred and hostility were a form of restraint, but these terrifying enemies would instead rouse his fighting spirit, allowing him to break free from his comfort and pleasure. He would advance valiantly, killing decisively and cruelly destroying all obstacles. He would step on the corpses of his enemies and laugh in delight. The most difficult to deal with were instead those gentle and affectionate people. Those who wholeheartedly care for him, those who are willing to do anything for him. Therefore, he did not want to consider himself a savior. Whether it was swallowing the devilish heart of the Black Sun or being killed by the Thunder God General of the Ninth Heaven millions of times, those were the paths he had chosen. He did not need anyone to thank him or repay him. If this was really a sacrificial ceremony, then he didn't mind becoming a proud and aloof sacrifice. If the cold stars don't notice, I will sacrifice my blood to the emperor. However, if they did not rouse all the demon folk, it was impossible for them to win this war. Instead, it would fall into great chaos due to the continuous fusion of the two worlds. From the moment he took this step, it was no longer about him alone. He was the leader of all sins, the source of all evil. I am a group of demons. He sank his mind deep into the depths of the demon domain. The pain and resentment accumulated by the trillions of demon folk for billions of years surged like the abyssal sea. They did not desire redemption, only revenge. He didn't even care who he was going to take revenge on. He just wanted to drink blood and souls. Burning to death is better than sinking to live an ignoble existence. Li Qingshan's voice rang out, cold and resolute, echoing through the mountains. Qian Rongji bowed. You are my will, my fate. Only the tree for the Garden of Solitude. A gentle breeze blew past the Bodhi tree, and the thousands of branches and leaves echoed together. With a metallic tint, it formed a wondrous melody. However, today's tone was different from usual. There was less Zen and more Taoist in it. The Buddha was currently resting with his eyes closed. He opened his eyes when he heard the voice, brought his palms together, and bowed in greeting. He smiled. Teacher, long time no see. How have you been? Aren't you going to lecture on alchemy today? If someone else heard that, they would definitely be astounded. Just who could be referred to as teacher by the Buddha? The newcomer was a Taoist priest. He had white hair, but he had a ruddy, youthful face. His crane cloak fluttered in the wind, giving him the smell of smoke and fire. At first glance, he seemed no different from regular old Taoists. However, this old Taoist priest was the ancestor of Taoism, the teacher of all immortals, Taishang Laojun. Contrary to the Buddha who spread the Dharma and delivered all living beings from suffering, he spent most of his time in the Tushita heavenly palace comprehending the primordial Tao fruit. Other than occasionally refining a few cauldrons of pills for the celestial arch and explaining the primordial Tao fruit to the immortals, he never participated in the affairs of the world. The last time he met the Buddha was tens of thousands of years ago. He knew that even if he rejected the title of teacher, the other party would still insist, so he accepted it calmly. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. He put his palms together and bowed. He said, the celestial the arch saw the birth of the demon star and the beginning of the calamity. He is holding a banquet to discuss the matter of the demons, so he specially ordered me to visit the Venerable One. The Buddha nodded slightly and accepted the title of Venerable One. He smiled. His Majesty is probably very happy. I'm so happy. I took out the bear skin and walked around the palace wearing it, but I can't see the sword on my waist. Old Lord Taishang shook his head and smiled bitterly. As for the whereabouts of the sword, he naturally knew. The Buddha said in surprise, don't tell me it's still the one Zhuolu wore back then. Taishang Laojun nodded with a straight face. I specially made a divination, and it really is that one. The two of them laughed together, their laughter stirring the Bodhi leaves on the tree. That's really bothering me. His Majesty has always felt that the previous two calamities were unfair, and he blamed you for ruining his plans. So he specially ordered me to pass a message to you. Heaven's will cannot be defied. You can do it twice, but not thrice. It was clearly teacher's idea. If you don't do it, I won't do it either. That's also something that can't be helped. I have also deeply let him down. But please rest assured, this time, I will not cause any unnecessary trouble. With their realm, any trace of memory would not become indifferent with time. Every time they thought about it, it was no different from being there. The emotions they felt from it were 1,000,000 times that of ordinary people. They could understand and sympathize with the ignorance and despicableness of the world, but the world could not understand their wisdom and compassion. Of course, be it the Celestial, the Arch, or the Buddha, they were also limited by their abilities and could not do anything about it. The pride of using the world as a chessboard and all living beings as chess pieces was just the delusion of mortals. The Celestial, the Arch, is the descendant of the Fuxi clan after all. The proud dragon has no regrets. Taishang Laojun stood with his hands behind his back. It was unknown what he was thinking about, but in a trance, his body seemed to have become extremely tall, connecting with the sky, standing above the great Tao, looking down at everything from an unreachable height. In the blink of an eye, at the same time, he was indeed only 7 feet tall, an old Taoist covered in smoke and fire. Extremely ordinary but extremely great, extremely weak but extremely strong, doing nothing but everything. The two completely opposite realms and feelings were perfectly unified in his body. Buddha praised, "Teacher has improved a step further. If teacher did not come to see me, I would have gone to see teacher and receive another lesson." The Tao is endless, mysterious and profound, and indescribable. Unfortunately, you are only interested in the living beings of the world, and cannot see what I see. In the end, wisdom is just a means to you. If you can move your gaze away from the living beings and observe the world with me, the wisdom you will obtain will be far greater than this, Taishang Laojun said regretfully. With teacher's wisdom, he is naturally not willing to be restricted to the mortal world. However, we are also one of the living beings. The lotus is born from the mud. The appearance is born from the heart, and the realm is created from the heart. Without living beings, the world is meaningless. As long as you and I can understand the suffering of the living beings, we cannot transcend. I have never been able to argue against you. Those who are kind do not argue, and those who argue are not good. Words of faith are not beautiful, and good words are not believed. Neither good nor beautiful, just like me. Under the tacit understanding was a disagreement that could not be resolved even after millions of years. Chapter 1627. Perhaps some students didn't know that after this volume, it would be the final volume of the legend of the great sage. Unknowingly, you've already gone through 4 or 5 cycles of winter and summer. I'm sure you've experienced many major changes in your life while reading this book. Starting from the first volume, the young wanderer, Li Qingshan, transformed into a demon, and Shaoan regrown from bone to bone. After experiencing the wondrous dangers of the underground demon city, he became a tragic novelist in The Crisscrossing of the 100 Schools. He swore an oath that would last until death did them part. That was the beginning of the book, and it could also be said to be the first part. Then, during the beginning of chaos and the chaotic battle in Green Prefecture, Qingshan rose against the current and became the lord of the clear river water. After a series of dance of corpses and ghosts, he obtained Phoenix Nirvana. Then he went through the mist province's cloud dream on the shores of the South Sea. He was also once lost at the end of the void. Finally, he returned as a king, conquering the east and conquering the west. He was known as the unparalleled Demon King. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the journey had passed. Rather than the end of the first half, it would be more accurate to call it the middle part. During this process, he really experienced a storm. Who knew how many times he tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep? They were ecstatic when they were enlightened, and they cried when they were lost. He had once been sent high into the sky by a huge wave, mistakenly believing that he had learned how to fly, but in the blink of an eye, he was slammed into the abyss. Actually, I had already expected it. When the book reached a few 100,000 words, the first recommendation would be, cross the sea. After all, my life has never been smooth sailing. I just didn't expect it to be so torturous this time. I've long since given up on chasing success. I just want to write a novel that I like and work hard to make it better and better. It doesn't matter if I can't become a god or earn a lot of money. There are so many losers in this world, and someone has to lose. Why can't it be me? Yep, I'm just that inspirational. However, such a small wish, such a natural thing, was actually so difficult to achieve. Sometimes, after putting in all the effort, it would be better to stay where they were. He denied his past self, but he didn't know where his future self was. Many people have said to me, "You think too much." But this is the greatest pleasure of my life. No matter how painful it was, he had never regretted it. No matter how painful and torturous it was, he had never regretted it. Wang Engshi said, "The world's marvelous, extraordinary spectacle often lies in the fact that it is dangerous and far away, yet people rarely reach it." Chapter 1630. A black sun illuminated the boundless demonic land. All of the mountains, rivers, vegetation were enveloped in a layer of darkness, as if they were looking through black glass. It was condensed and manifested from the laws of the demon domain, bestowing a demon heart upon all demon folk. In essence, every single demon heart was a demon heart of the black sun. Legends would always come true. But now, the black sun was embedded with a golden rim. Even though the golden light was weak, it still formed a halo, giving off a smear of ink blue. The pure land of ultimate bliss and the demon domain's evil land originally belonged to the Qilin paradise, transformed from the primordial Qilin. They had been split apart by the Buddha Tathagata's unbelievable powers. However, as the man with the Qilin's bloodline descended and brought back the pool of lotus flowers in the Great Lightning Temple, the two worlds began to approach one another. The laws wove together and merged. The light from the distant pure land of ultimate bliss made countless demon folk gaze up in infatuation, making them forget about everything around them. Every pair of black eyes was inlaid with a golden rim. The demon domain that had sunk into darkness for millions of years finally welcomed its first glimmer of light. Those who had never sunk into darkness would never understand the value of this light. It made every single demon heart shine with light. In that moment, they trembled with joy. They cried tears of joy, unable to control themselves, as if they had ascended to bliss. The demonic land had never experienced such hope, such peace. It was basically more intoxicating than any fine wine in the world. The usual games that demon folk loved the most, slaughter, torture, deception, and betrayal, all paled in comparison to this joy. It was meaningless. However, the meaning of their existence had been denied at the same time. A bone-deep pain erupted hysterically. It was more unbearable than any torture. It was filled with shame, regret, emptiness, and despair. It was as if they had sunk straight into hell. Those who have never seen light should have been able to endure the darkness relatively easily. If they've never held on to hope, they won't feel despair. A woman murmured softly like the hiss of a snake, bestowing great curses and great blessings upon all life. "I hope you like this fate." She had already offered the most sumptuous offering to the demonic sky, a proud tiger. Then she lowered her head and smiled gently. "I still have to thank you." In her arms was a baby who was sleeping soundly, completely unaffected by the changes in the outside world. There was no demon heart in his body. His entire body was enveloped in a holy light, and even the surging demonic energy could not get close to him. He had an inconceivable sense of cleanliness. He was the son of Jiao Ying, the son of the evil god, and also the son of humanity. He was so weak that he could not survive on his own, but he did something that even the demon god could not do. He made that proud and aloof tiger willingly walk up the altar. He remembered who had shouted, "Save the children!" A mysterious power protected him and all the newborn infants in the demon domain, allowing them to sleep peacefully and escape the fate of being born as demon folk. The woman sighed and said, "What a lucky child, luckier than me." At the same time, in the boundless demon realm, countless beings were suffering in hellish pain. When the pain and despair reached the limit, their heartstrings snapped one by one, and their demon hearts shattered one by one. It seemed to come from the very depths of hell. Soundless rumbles shook up the entire demon domain. Hundreds of millions of demon folk descended into madness, completely demonifying and turning into twisted, vicious demonic beasts. They let out hysterical roars at the black sun rimmed with gold in the sky, filled with loathing and curses. They were tempted to tear it to pieces and devour it. That was the source of all pain. At the top of the mountains, the fierce wind ruffled his scarlet hair. A man suddenly opened his eyes and listened attentively. Thousands of crystalline snowflakes cut into his face like blades. He felt a deep pain as well. Why was he here? Why was he alone? No one knew. No one knew what he was searching for in such a high place. The miniature world had ceased to exist a long time ago, having merged with the entire demon domain. However, the battle between the gods and demons in his heart had never stopped for a single moment. Instead, it became even more intense. At that moment, it reached a whole new peak. All the beings in the demon domain were in his heart. The suffering of all beings was his suffering. However, he was not the merciful and benevolent gods and Buddhas of the 9 heavens, but the king of demons. He did not bestow joy, hope, happiness, or peace, nor did he promise a world of ultimate bliss or a blissful afterlife. Instead, he bestowed great pain and great despair. He only promised destruction and death. He pursed his lips, and his expression immediately became as resolute as a rock. He stared at the empty space, opening his chest to the wind and snow. He was always like this. The more pain he experienced, the more determined he became. The more he struggled, the more determined he became. The frenzied demonic beasts did not attack all living beings in the surroundings madly like before. Instead, they all began to run madly, rushing towards the wilderness like they were on a great migration. Rumble! The beasts surged and the ground shook. They were like surging rivers, but their final destination was not the ocean, but the sky. The beasts chased after the sun, day and night, without rest, until they died of exhaustion. At the very least, they could still burn in the flames like moths flying into a flame, but the sun was beyond their reach. It was impossible to reach in the end. Burning was also an extravagant hope. The man suddenly smiled bitterly before quickly becoming vicious again. His fangs protruded, and he roared at the sky like a demonic beast. Why are you so greedy for bliss, that you didn't hesitate to create such a demonic land? This question passed through the demonic sky and shook the laws, directly reaching the pure land of ultimate bliss. It reverberated in the temples and halls, shaking the statues of gods and Buddhas, but no one answered. He didn't need to answer either. What he needed was war, the flames of war that burned everything until the demonic land and the pure land merged again. When that time came, there would be no more endless pain. Of course, there would be no more eternal joy. Life in this world was supposed to be bittersweet, wasn't it? But he didn't feel the slightest bit of joy. Didn't he already become a god? After experiencing so many hardships, he had never been so close to the 9 heavens. The frog jumped out of the well and finally turned into a star. As he refined his spirit to return to the void, he controlled the laws of heaven and earth, and his will simultaneously permeated the pure land and demonic land. All the changes reached an unprecedented height. Be it the ox demon, tiger demon, phoenix demon, or spirit turtle, all of them had their own enlightenment. Needless to say, the Chilan transformation was born for this world, and there was no longer any obstruction. Only the demonic ape had fallen into a state of dispiritedness. It was filled with sorrow and depression. This was originally the transformation he liked the most, the happiest when he cultivated. He was free and unrestrained. Now that he had chosen to shoulder this fate, he could no longer be free and unrestrained. All he could do was sit on the top of the mountain alone, listening to the howls of the wind and snow, silently bearing the sorrow of the demon domain and protecting all the children of humanity. He allowed the pain and resentment that had accumulated for millions of years to surge in his heart like an abyssal sea. At this moment, he could not help but look back even though he had never been willing to look back. Cheongji, Ru Exen, Uzijin, King Millipede, Hua Sungzun, Banyan Tree King, the names and familiar figures that he had not heard in a long time immediately became vivid, never losing their color. He could not help but smile. It really was a very, very long path. He had gone from a remote mountain village to a foolish cowherd boy, following the winding, rugged mountain path, often having to cut his way through brambles and thorns, scale cliffs, and leap over abysses, all the way to the top of the mountain, the king of demon gods. Along the way, even though there were many difficulties and dangers, He had also witnessed extremely magnificent sights. He had never regretted it. Now, he might as well take a break and reminisce about the glorious past, letting his mind run wild. Stars flickered in the sky. Every single star was a world, and one of them belonged to him. With the unification of the demon domain, the structure of the world rose further, and time flowed slower and slower. Even though the world of the 5 continents had already expanded by who knew how many times, to the point where it could accommodate cultivators who had undergone the 5th heavenly tribulation. However, compared to the demon domain, it was still incomparable. As a result, when he looked at the world of the 5 continents from the demon domain, it was like he had pressed the fast-forward button. In a single moment, the sun rose and set, the clouds changed, and the stars changed. If I reach beyond the 9 heavens, a mortal's life will probably only be a snap of a finger, he thought to himself. He chanted in his heart and concentrated. Everything suddenly slowed down. The sunrise and sunset returned to normal speed, and the white clouds slowly changed shape. At the same time, thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. Nothing was faster than the thoughts in his mind. It's better to not return to one's hometown when one is rich. Even if he was mocked as a monkey wearing a crown. The ape demon immediately perked up and scratched his ears and cheeks impatiently. Wasn't it just a big monkey? Thoughts leapt out of the demon domain one by one, returning to the world of the 5 continents. That was where he was born. Chapter 1631. As the deep blue sky-devouring beast roamed and devoured in the void, the 5 continents world continued to expand. New lands, oceans, and skies were being created almost every moment, bringing all sorts of strange animals and plants, as well as the natives of various worlds. In the beginning, the god of the world, Li Qingshan, had to make a simple division for them. The animals were placed in the demonic beast continent, the humans were placed in the central continent, and the humanoid races with special bloodlines were placed in the mutant continent. Later on, his will gradually became a part of the world will, and the laws of the world would automatically divide all living beings, just like the operation of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The Aborigines suddenly lost their homes, but their feelings were very different. The cultivators from various worlds simply regarded the 5 continents world as a paradise. Not only was the spiritual chi of heaven and earth denser, but it could also accommodate higher-level cultivators, so they did not have to take the risk to transcend the heavenly tribulation of ascension. Most importantly, the myriad manifestations sect of the human realm had accumulated over 1,000,000 years in the sky, and Li Qingshan had copied it all, including the core myriad heavenly book. This was not something any sect or cultivation method in any world could compare to. Moreover, all of this was completely open to everyone, and even mortals could go in and take a look. This caused the cultivators who had just arrived to be wild with joy, and they completely forgot the anger of the destruction of their world. For cultivators, nothing was more important than their own cultivation. The world was a place that they wanted to leave, and now, it was equivalent to ascension. The mortals' mood was much worse. After all, they had lost all of their property in an instant. Although they were given new land under the arrangement of the world society, which was often more fertile and vast than their original land, they could not help but feel sad about being forced to leave their homes. However, there was no resentment, because all the land was distributed according to the number of people. It was almost a social movement of beating the local tyrants and dividing the land, without any bloodshed. And no matter which world it was always the case that the rich are few, and the poor are numerous, and the rich have fields everywhere, and the poor have no place to stand. After this equal wealth card was used, most people expressed that their mood was stable and they were overjoyed. The world society was their great savior. As a result, most of the mortals were happy, the cultivators of the upper echelons were happy, and the small group of people in the middle were happy. However, regardless of whether it was sadness or resentment, it soon disappeared. Compared to cultivators who lived for a long time, the lives of mortals were far too short. In the short span of one generation, a foreign land would become their home. Between the fields, smoke curled up from kitchen chimneys, wheat fields were golden, and barefooted children ran and played. They didn't understand the joys and sorrows, but they all wanted to become cultivators from the bottom of their hearts. Traveling through the countryside, the storytellers from the Cloud Wisp Club described a magnificent dream to them. He told them that as long as they worked hard, they could all become cultivators when they grew up. This was the promise of the great chivalrous king Li Qingshan. A farmer looked at this scene from afar and revealed a gratified smile. Then, a strange expression flashed across his face as he thought to himself, could it be that he was oppressed too deeply when he was young, and that's why he decided to do this? This thought flashed through his mind, and he dared not think too much about it. There was no benefit in slandering the god of the world. Even if they were from the same hometown in the past, they were not particularly close, and that person clearly did not cherish old friendships. He walked through the golden wheat leisurely. His large, rough hand brushed past the wheat, as if he was caressing his own child. Yep, it's another great harvest this year. He was not a regular farmer, but a cultivator from the School of Agriculture. He had already undergone the third heavenly tribulation now, so he could be referred to as a great grandmaster. There were only a handful of them across the entire 5 continents. Among the academy, the path of cultivation of the School of Agriculture had always been the slowest, and often, only people without any talent would choose the School of Agriculture, so he could truly be referred to as a genius. The first time he was referred to like that, he was surprised and laughed for a very long time. The last time he had been referred to as a genius was when he was still a teenager in Crouching Ox Village. Back then, he was one of the greatest geniuses in the village. Not only was he the eldest son of the village head, but he had even caught the eye of the master of the Iron Fist and been accepted as his final disciple. How awe-inspiring was that? Back then he was still a cowherd boy. Moreover, he was known for his eccentric personality and strange words and actions. He had even been unlucky enough to be possessed by a ghost in the past, only recovering after being punished by the witch. However, he continued to be a loner, and he even became fond of talking to himself and cows. Everyone believed it would probably be difficult for him to find a wife in this lifetime. Perhaps he would be single for the rest of his life. Now that he thought about it, there really was a reason why he had been bullied by his elder brother and sister-in-law. Sigh, why am I thinking about random things again? He had already made up his mind to bury these memories in the deepest part of his heart. He would not say a single word to anyone, just in case he angered that person. Of course, even if he said it out loud, probably not a lot of people would believe it. The heroic king actually had a time when he was in such a horrible shape. Apart from a few old friends in the 9 provinces, most people believed that he was born to battle the world, that he was omnipotent. However, things like secrets were things that the deeper they were hidden, the more they could not help but think about them, and the more they thought about them, the more they found them to be. They had even fought for the title of the greatest hero of Crouching Ox Village, and they had even engaged in a battle of the peak. Forget it. It doesn't matter if I think about it. It's not like he can always pay attention to this world. Sigh, I refuse to believe that Li Qingshan will be able to kill me with a bolt of lightning. A mysterious smile appeared on his simple, dark face. He possessed the slyness of a peasant. Boom! A bolt of lightning tore through the sky, landing on his face. His dark face darkened even further, and his smile immediately stiffened. A voice suddenly rang out from behind him. Oh? Li Long, does that mean I deserve to be bullied? Li Long slowly turned around, only to see Li Qingshan standing on the undulating waves of wheat with his hands on his hips. His fingertips produced sparks as he looked at him in amusement. Li Long said sternly, "You can't say that. It's the unfortunate encounter when you were young that made you recognize the unfairness of the world. You've made up your mind to lend a helping hand whenever you see injustice, to return justice to the world." Li Qingshan let out a long laugh. "There are no gods above me. Justice is only within the blade." A sense of heroism rushed into the air, kicking up a storm and stirring up waves of wheat. This was what he had comprehended when he was young. Now that he had traversed the 6 paths of reincarnation and seen deities, Buddhas, and demons, no matter how he thought about it, it was still the same. Li Long let out a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He had managed to bluff his way through in the end. As expected, he could not speak ill of the god of the world, even if it was just in his heart. He considered whether he should ask for a cup of water of oblivion from that fellow Ru Exit. Li Qingshan suddenly lowered his head and asked with a smile, "My old friend, are you willing to lend me a hand?" Li Long's liver trembled when he heard Meng Qi address him as a fellow villager. Without any hesitation, he patted his chest and said, "Of course. Whatever Master Chivalrous King commands, Li Long will obey. You're the god of the world. Nothing in the world is bigger than you. How can a farmer like me help you?" Chapter 1632. Li Long was rendered speechless. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. My fellow countryman is far too narrow-minded. It's not like this is the world of the 9 provinces. How can there be a demon cavern that leads to the demon domain? Moreover, I'm just a farmer, so how am I supposed to fight against those vicious demon folk? I'll just be eaten alive. Isn't that like throwing a meat bun at a dog and never getting it back? It's also like a weasel pulling a chick and never getting it back, and it's even more like... Just as he was feeling a myriad of emotions, Li Qingshan interrupted him. "Oh my, I couldn't tell normally, but you sure have quite a lot going on in your mind. You're full of proverbs." Li Long could not care too much anymore. He grabbed Li Qingshan's sleeve. "Hero King, Qingshan, Erlang, I've never harmed you, so you can't treat me like this. I did fight you once, but I didn't win. Do you still remember when you killed your way into the Black Wind stronghold alone? I knelt before my master and begged him for a very long time before he sent reinforcements to help you. You should at least spare a thought for me." Back then he was mainly afraid that Li Qingshan would be trapped in the Black Wind stronghold and the Crouching Ox village would come for revenge, but it was true. However, by the time he arrived in the end, the Black Wind stronghold had already been slaughtered by Li Qingshan. Even now, the sound of him sitting before the mountain of burning corpses was still extremely clear when he thought about it. Li Qingshan could not help but laugh aloud. That was his proudest work, the battle that made him famous. It was even more satisfying than killing the Demon King afterwards. "Kid, you sure know how to flatter me." Li Long rubbed his hands and smiled as honestly as an old farmer. "How can you call this flattery? I'm just speaking from the bottom of my heart." Li Qingshan stopped smiling and straightened his face. "Don't worry. I'm not harming you by sending you to the demon domain. I'm helping you." "What do you mean?" Li Long asked in surprise. He had always understood Li Qingshan's personality. He was straightforward and would take his revenge if he could, but he would never resort to trickery. Li Qingshan smiled. "You might not know this, but I've already become the master of the demon domain." He purposely came to find Li Long not just because he heard a few words of slander or to reminisce. At this time, the sun was setting in the west and the sky was red. On the field of harvest, the king was talking to the farmer. As the saying goes, food is the most important thing to the people. The people who came from various worlds would not have too much resentment as long as they had food to eat. As long as they could eat a full meal, they would be deeply grateful to him. Demon folk needed to eat too, not just regular demon folk. In a higher world like the demon domain, even demon kings and demon emperors could not stop eating and drinking. They could not rely on demon chi alone to survive. The higher the level of the world, the greater the restrictions on cultivators. When Li Qingshan first arrived at the human realm, he felt hungry very quickly. It was the same logic. Demon kings and demon emperors did not have to worry about food at all, but regular demon folk were not that lucky. Once they ran out of food, they could only kill one another and feast on humans. In such a harsh environment, even a regular world could not give birth to any kind people. When the Elysium stole all the vitality of the demon domain, it also severed the root of kindness among demon folk. The demon domain had invaded the Trichiliocosm mainly for a single bite of food. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for the barren demonic soil to sustain so many demon folk. As a result, after Li Qingshan, the king of demon gods, unified the demon domain, the first thing he did was not gather the 12 demon gods and plan some grand strategy against the heavenly palace. Instead, he had to deal with the problem of regular demonfolk's food. If he did not deal with this problem, all his strategies and tactics would be water without a source. And, without the support of 1 billion demonfolk, how were they supposed to fend off the gods and Buddhas? Li Qingshan squinted his eyes and gazed into the distant horizon. A smear of red light flickered through his eyes. If he was right, before long, all the worlds controlled by the demon domain would face a full-scale counterattack or even be completely destroyed. The demon domain would lose most of their sources of food. Afterwards, it would definitely lead to a great famine that would sweep through the entire demon domain. The number of demon folk who would die would probably be more than 100 battles. The demon domain would enter a prolonged period of chaos until its population shrank to the limit, perhaps 1/10, or perhaps 100th. All of the surviving demon folk would become even more brutal and vicious. It would be even more impossible for them to recover their humanity. The curtains to war had already been drawn. The flames of war would ignite in countless worlds, shaking up every single star. Compared to this, the grand history of war between the human realm and the demon domain in the past was nothing more than a small skirmish. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that as the demon domain rapidly approached the Pure Land, the demon domain would constantly recover its vitality. It would no longer be a barren, desolate land. Only then would they be able to find a way to recover production and become self-sufficient, so that they could last through this prolonged and brutal war until the Elysium completely descended. That's why the demon domain just happens to be in need of a talent like you. Li Qingshan's gaze was eager. Li Long's cultivation was only at the 3rd heavenly tribulation. It was not even worth mentioning. He was only equivalent to a demon king. Who knew how many demon kings the demon domain had, and probably every single one of them was better at fighting than him. Just in the world of the 5 continents alone, who knew how many were more powerful than him? However, his value could not be compared to any demon king or cultivator. What mattered was the path he took. As it turned out, the family of farmers, a small family that could only be regarded as the bottom of the 100 schools of thought, turned out to be the foundation of everything. They sowed 100 grains and had enough food and clothing. They repaired hunger and saved disasters. Farming and warfare were one. They could not fight without farming. Food was the foundation of the people were the foundation of the country, and the country was the foundation of the ruler. The clan he belonged to was also called the Shinong. Li Long's heart was filled with shock. The person in front of him was actually a real god. That poor cowherd boy with only an old oxen had already ruled the boundless demon domain. Li Qingshan heard his thoughts and sighed in his heart. He would rather not come to the boundless demon domain to find that oxen. Li Long's expression changed. Whether it was the integration of the 2 sides of the demon domain and the Pure Land, or the sudden arrival of the Great Tribulation of heaven and earth, these pieces of information were more shocking than the previous one. Only with the ability of a great cultivator could he barely digest it. He lowered his head and pondered for a long time. Suddenly he raised his head and asked, "Is this an order? Or an oracle?" Li Qingshan shook his head. Li Long was the most suitable candidate, but he was not the only one. Although the family of farmers was small, it was still quite widespread. Although their cultivation was not high, with the highest being only at the 3rd heavenly tribulation, with him, the king of the demon gods, using the resources of the entire demon domain to support them, how difficult would it be to become a human sovereign or even a human immortal? Of course, the price was to be directly involved in the war. However, with the raging of the great tribulation of heaven and earth, who could stay out of it? Li Long had experienced the series of upheavals in the 9 states, so he naturally understood this. However, he did not agree immediately. He asked again, "Because we are from the same hometown?" Li Qingshan smiled. "Because you are a genius." Li Long smiled bitterly. "Of course, I am the 2nd hero of Crouching Ox Village." Li Qingshan continued, "So you are young enough. You still haven't seen all living beings as ants. You still dare to grab my sleeve and call me Erlang." Li Long's heart trembled. The unreachable god in front of him still looked like a teenager, and he was about to break into the Black Wind's stronghold alone. The setting sun withdrew its last ray of light. The sky darkened and became as blue as water. The crows and sparrows returned to their nests, and the children who ran and played in the fields also returned home. They had a good meal. Li Long casually plucked an ear of wheat and crushed the husk. He placed the golden, plump grain in his mouth and chewed it carefully. He swallowed it slowly. His voice was deep and hoarse. "We were all mortals in the first place, right?" Li Qingshan nodded. "Yes. When I was young, Crouching Ox Village was like the entire world. But later on, I felt that the world was just the Crouching Ox Villages." Li Qingshan's eyes flashed. He did not think someone as unremarkable as him could say something like that. He had not chosen the wrong person. He was the only one and irreplaceable. "Qingshan, this time, let me help you." Li Long cupped his hands and bowed. "Thank you for your help." Li Qingshan also cupped his hands and bowed. At this moment, the ruler and his subject bowed to each other. Under the ink-blue sky, they left behind two dark silhouettes. The ruler had chosen him as the Minister of Finance and ordered him to make preparations for the trip to the demon domain. Before he left, he said, "In the vast world, you will achieve great things." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.